Sup, freaks? This episode was brought to you by our good friends at River. The last few months have shown us that it's really hard to find a reliable partner in the Bitcoin space that can get you access to Bitcoin, help you purchase Bitcoin, help you mine Bitcoin, and help you send that Bitcoin to cold storage. Third-party dependencies like Prime Trust are security holes. Luckily, with River, they built their whole exchange. They built their infrastructure. They built their wallets. They built their multi-sig cold storage. Their Bitcoin that is held on their exchange is backed one-to-one in that multi-sig cold storage, though they do encourage you to take self-custody of your Bitcoin. If you DCA, if you dollar cost average, you're not going to pay any fees on those buys. Other exchanges have insane fees and spreads on DCA purchases. You can avoid that using River. Go to river.com/TFTC, set up that account today, and pick your last Bitcoin partner, the most reliable one. River.com/TFTC. Enjoy this episode.
Go ahead, start this fucker. We're wasting hugely important stuff.
We're recording as you take a sip of milk. I guess.
If that's as bad as it gets, you got off easy, Marty.
Well, I mean, we'll just start. I was telling Rudy, Dave, before you hopped on, this is a dream come true for me. We're sitting down with Dave Collum and Rudy Havenstein after listening to
Havenstein, Rudy.
I always say Havenstein, but you can call it, you can just say whatever you want.
Havenstein or Havenstein. I think it's Havenstein.
Okay.
But it's your fucking name, so you could call it Harvenstein for all I care. That's fine.
Just Rudy's fine. Yeah. Or just sir to you.
Right. Or hey you. Yeah.
Personally, I'm a Havenstein maximalist myself. It's what your name has been in my mind for the last 10 years.
Havenstein hodler, huh? Yeah.
I was telling Rudy, I've been following him for 10 years now, and he was formative in my development in terms of how to grasp what's going on in the world of central banks and the broader economy. I was a young 22-year-old analyst at that point. And
Where were you?
I was in Chicago working at a managed futures fund. We were fund to fund that index commodity trading advisors. And so I had to be able to write about central bank tea leaves and their policy decisions. And I was very confused because none of it made sense to me. And I found this crazy pseudo nim on Twitter named Rudy Havenstein. It was speaking a lot of sense. And
I hope you didn't quote me in any of your newsletters back then. They would have fired you, or any of your reports.
No, it was strictly no
party line.
No party line. It was strict. Like, here's what happened. Here's how the markets moved.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. But Dave, I know, you've been DMing me for years about like Rudy, like, hey, you ever going to get him on? And then you randomly tweeted me at like 1 a.m. a couple nights ago, or like, check your DMs, and here we are.
Yeah, right. Well, Rudy and I couldn't figure out who was in charge of setting it up. We were probably the simplest chore anyone ever had to do, and neither of us thought but we thought the other guy was going to set it up. And to your credit, I provided a list of 3 names out of quite a few that I went through, actually, and Rudy chose you out of the 3. And so you came right to the top of the list. So Rudy and I were scheming. He said, which young hodler podcaster's career can we destroy in 2.5 hours?
Yeah, well, I was telling Marty that I really liked his interview he did with Whitney Webb. So that was,
I'm a super. You raved about Whitney, and I'm a super Whitney fan. I just had a deep Whitney just 10 minutes ago, actually.
Oh, good. Yeah, tell her I wish her well. This is the first time I'm talking to Dave, by the way. So ever. Hi, Dave.
Hi. I would like to go back down memory lane a little bit here. I told Marty that we must have connected back when we were both sitting there at 300 followers a pop or something.
Yeah, 2013. I went and looked. It was probably like summer 2013.
And I remember thinking, oh, this guy's quirky. And then I think there was one day when it just caught me when you made reference to something that that you said was not fake. And you said it's not like the Loch Ness Monster or North Dakota. I go, that guy's fucked up, right? That's a funny fucking joke. Where did that come from, right? And so I started watching much more carefully. And then one point I noticed you saw my tweets, and I didn't know how you were keeping track of Twitter because it was getting pretty clogged. And you said, oh, lists. I go, oh, lists. I didn't know about lists, and so I set up lists. And then there were some other things along the way that we kind of been following each other along. It's funny. You have friends on Twitter that you've never talked to, and yet they're still friends, right? Marty, you and I are friends. Rudy, you and I are friends.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
Way better than some real friends, the kind that you go to dinner with and get in an argument over Trump or Biden and tip over the table and stomp out, right? Those the real kind. And you may recall, Rudy, that when COVID showed up, I sent you my password.
Yes. You thought you were going to die.
Well, I said if I die. I didn't know what was going to happen, but I said if I die, I want you to take my password and tweet from heaven. Yeah. And I want you to have a party with this one, right? And you were uneasy with the idea, and I said, "This is my dying wish, Rudy." Right?
Well, I remember. Fortunately, that I was uncomfortable with it, and fortunately, it never came to pass. So
not yet. I'm working on it. This bladder stone of mine is trying to take me down to the stud. So,
well, that could be a separate podcast to cover the bladder stone.
We could do video on that one.
We've covered the bladder stone many times on this show.
All right.
Yeah, it's that long, isn't it? It's that long. I'm getting it taken out. It's like an Armageddon. We send in Bruce Willis and Ben Affleck. They're going to blast that sucker out of there. I'm going to get done on the 23rd of August. It hurts like a son of a bitch.
Yeah. No, I mean, I guess to add context to this conversation, maybe send us down the road.
Not yet, right?
I mean, again, like I want to echo what I said earlier, which is like, I view you two. I mean, I didn't know how old you were, Rudy, until probably like in recent years. I got a better grasp of like how much experience you have personally in markets, and obviously you're pretending to be the Rights Bank central banker during the Weimar age, so you have a context of history. And for me, you two, as somebody who's young, in my 30s, getting older, children now, but throughout my 20s, like you guys to me were like the gray beards who understand how fucked up the world is, excuse my language, and we're trying to pass.
You're trying to win the pot, aren't you? You're going for the pot. I can see it in your eye. You got the twinkle.
No, I mean
most F-bombs in one podcast. You're going for it.
Well, I don't know what Dave was trying to do 10 years ago, but if anyone,
an adult.
This is just my second podcast. I did the one with Grant Williams and Stephanie Pomboy. That was I've been following Grant for as long as you, Dave. 13 years, I think or 10 years since 2013. But I guess in 2013, I don't know, something was going on as usual with the Federal Reserve, and I just wanted to come on and I figured I can joke around, I can vent, and I can try and teach people about the Federal Reserve and what it's doing to this country. And I'd been watching, like I said, since the late 90s, the Fed, after Fleckenstein turned me on to them. And I had been doing this in emails for years to friends, just doing market stuff, although I'm not much of a trader, but I mean, just stuff like macro stuff, and also what's going on with the Fed, because most people don't know about that. And, back then, I started with zero follow.
Did he just freeze up?
He did.
Back? Sorry.
There you are.
Next, sorry. I don't know what happened. I think the CIA started, I don't know what happened. But anyway.
Where were you before? You must have been at a chat board of some kind. You must have been someplace, because you're a very social animal. So you must have been spewing.
No, it was all emails from some of it dates back to the 90s, but definitely was doing a daily one since about 2009. Just to a couple hundred I guess it was 150 or so people, and for free and everything. And some people liked it, and some people didn't want to read it because they're busy. They don't want to know, or they don't. A lot of people don't want to know. And so anyway, that was just my whole point. And Twitter's a great format for me because, it's just boom, boom, boom. But as I said on Grant's podcast, I just didn't want to be a guy that goes out and says, the Fed sucks, with a funny picture. I want to be, look what the Fed's doing. Here's a chart of the last 30 years. Look at how the middle class is doing. Look at how the top 1% is doing. And so I think that gave me credibility. And as I said, also, I had a lot of, when I had like 200 followers or 50 followers, I had some prominent, mainstream FinTwit guys that came after me, like, look at this idiot. And I fought them back off. And now if they haven't blocked me, they don't bother me anymore because, if you're going to come for me like that, you better come, loaded for bear because I know my stuff now. I've been studying this enough. And, I had IMF guys and, ex-central bank guys who get mad at me. It's like, I don't care because I found out that there's a lot of people that aren't like, part of the elites. And like I always say about inflation, I'll argue with some very smart people on Twitter that think inflation's like a really good thing and we need some. And I've ever heard one guy that's very smart.
Stupid. We call those people stupid.
Yeah, but I always say at the end, all right, let's go to a supermarket parking lot and have this debate. You might win it on FinTwit where everyone wants ZERP and QE for infinity because they're part of the 1% that own all the stocks and bonds and houses that your kids can't own anymore. So anyway, I just got a little fired up and angry. As I can see, I'm fired up right now. It's like,
has someone got a pen or something?
What? Oh, is that me? I'm clicking the pen. Yeah.
Yeah, you should put the pen.
I'll put the pen down. Anyway, so that was the point, to educate. And then I think it's
about 2.5 hours. I'll be just drooling,
No, I'm sorry. I just, I think it's more people are starting to wake up, even though it's just a very small percentage.
So I actually somehow
I threw the pen away.
Love a pen jar.
Yeah, I threw the pen away.
I'll put my F-bombs against your pen flicks. I was hanging out at Doug Nolan's chat board from, I think it was the late 90s, although it's getting very vague now. So, and it turns out it was Doug who ran it, working for David Tice. Yeah. And what I didn't know at the time is there were a lot of prominent people there. And there was about 250 of us. And the rest of the world just thought buying Global Crossing was the thing to do. Yeah. And I remember feeling insane being at that board and going, there's 200 of us who think the world's fucked up. And the rest of them seem to think it's just a wonderful place to be. And so.
I was probably there reading the comments. I mean, the Yahoo boards, some of the old stock chart boards from the 90s on. But I never commented until 10 years ago. Never posted anything. So, but I was reading. I mean, I was aware of Michael Burry's stuff and all that, but I wasn't responding to him. I was just sort of soaking it all in. And you're right. I mean, it's nice too. It's nice too to come. I know our audio here isn't as high tech as Grant and Stephanie. So I'm just kidding. But because there's a little bit of overlap. But anyway, or maybe it's just my setup. But anyway, go ahead. Sorry, just rambling.
That pen.
No, that's my hand on the fifth. I gotta tape my hands to the chair or something. But
I was going to interject. How much is Twitter as a tool, social media more broadly, really affected the discourse around some of these topics?
It's incredible because you wouldn't believe some of the followers that Dave and I have, for example. I'm sure you do too. They're just ridiculous. These are people I've been watching since the 80s or 90s, finance guys, prominent people, and that I never would have talked to them in a million years. And it's kind of like you start putting some things out, and it took a while on Twitter to find, my voice. At first I didn't know, am I going to do an impersonation of some guy from 1857 or, born? But then I finally hit the ground running. I'm very comfortable now. I know who I am, and people know who I am. And, yeah, so it's been great. I get in contact with all sorts of people. I never would have met Dave Collum or you without it. What am I going to do? Write you a letter, and you're like, "Who's this guy?" But like I've said before,
in the last podcast you did, you mentioned Jack Dorsey. Do you remember that day? Because you sent me a DM and said, we're about to get kicked off Twitter. And I said, why? And you said, go check and see who we just followed. And there was Rudy and I.
Yeah.
I knew why he did. Because what had happened is I was feeling sort of teary-eyed. Now, I always had a pretty fond spot in my heart for Jack Dorsey for some reason.
Yes, I agree.
I thought he was a victim of the evils of Silicon Valley and that his dream got squashed like, Melanie singing, look what they've done to my song.
Yeah.
And I went out there and said, look, people bitch about the darkness of Twitter. And I said, I think it's a great experience. I have nothing but joy and fun. And then I made a very flattering statement about you being my favorite Twitter feed. and then it was later that day that and I think someone must have said, hey, Jack, there's someone out there who didn't shit on you.
Right.
Jack said, oh, I got to follow those guys, right? So I think that's actually what did it.
Yeah, he followed you first, and then I think I was right after you. And
I think he just said click. I think he just said a click.
I always liked the guy because I think I watched the Joe Rogan thing he did with Vijaya, and
is that a real name or is that a nickname by some pornographic guy?
I'm not going to go there. I'm glad she's gone.
She's awful. She's awful.
Yeah, she is. And but I thought Jack was sort of sincere. And who's he talking to? Michael Malice or something in that? Maybe it was Mike Malice and not Rogan. I'm trying to remember.
I think it was Malice.
Yeah, and I thought they were. Yeah, maybe it was Malice and not Rogan that did the podcast. And I thought that
Jack
I
think it was Malice on Rogan.
Oh, that could have been. That could have been too. Yeah, I don't subscribe to Spotify, so I rarely see Rogan anymore. So
it was Tim Pool. Dorsey.
Oh, Tim Pool. I'm sorry. I get these guys confused.
Yeah.
Sorry, Tim Pool.
Tim went at him. Tim went at him hard.
Yeah, he did. He did a good job. And Jack only replied to me one time ever, our only interaction. And that was when he tweeted something like, hyperinflation is coming. It's on, it's something like that. Hyperinflation is coming. And I said, be careful what you wish for. It's the worst possible outcome for most people. And he said, he replied, said, I'm not wishing for it, nor do I desire it. So that was it. And
I saw your tweet responding to that, actually. I didn't, and I don't think he's ever said anything to me. My big, huge connection, besides the sweet meteor of death, and to Tanya McGrath, besides those two, I picked up Rogan. And I'm told my resume sitting on Rogan's desk, on Rogan's Talent Scout's desk. The problem is Rogan's star rose a lot faster than mine. So there's a point in his life where I think I could have gotten on. But now he's bringing in future kings and queens and presidents and shit like that. And so,
I don't follow. I've probably seen just less than 10 of his podcasts in my life, but does he delete some of his old? Was that true that when he went to Spotify, he deleted some of his more controversial ones or something? I don't know. Everybody kind of sells out at a certain point.
Yeah, he deleted a few episodes, I believe.
Yeah. But then again,
to cover up a problem, really?
Huh?
To cover up a problem?
Well, like maybe someone was too controversial for something. I mean, nothing's too controversial for me or you, but we're not advertisers.
Yeah. After Vijaya, what is there, right?
Yeah, well, it was interesting. Yeah. Well, then the next one, who happened to be an ex-VP at JP Morgan for, what was her name? The next Twitter Trust and Safety, remember? I got banned for 3 months. And then someone asked, why did you ban this guy? And she said, I could find the tweets, but she basically said, oh, he's beyond, he has 0 strikes. He's gone. He's done. And then I sent a final appeal. This is funny about Jack. So, if you get permanently suspended. I've been permanently suspended 4 times, right? So it doesn't seem to stick, thank God. But I did an appeal. An appeal is just you fill out a thing why you don't think you should be. And twice I'd been rejected on my appeal, and so I think Lynn Alden had made a tweet that was very widely spread that in favor of Elon let me back on. And so I figured I'll appeal one more time, and so I did. And I threw in at the end, like as an afterthought, oh, by the way, just ask Jack Dorsey about me. He follows me. And the next day I got unbanned. I have no idea if there was a connection or not. But also the next day, the Twitter Trust and Safety lady who had been a VP at JP Morgan for 7 years was let go. She left the next day. So I think her name was Emma, something like that. But that was interesting.
So I've been booted, I think, the same number of times, but you get big boots. Mine are little
Must.
stacks across the face, right?
Well, I've had those too, but 3 or 4 times for several months.
No, mine were like 24 hours, 7 days, things like that.
Yeah.
And I think it was the one that got the longest one is I think when I referred to Fauci as a skanky whore, and that somehow triggered.
Yeah. See so what? I mean, that's not a threat of violence or anything.
No, he is a skanky whore, so it's a statement of fact.
I can't prove he's not.
I could prove he is.
Yeah. All right. Well, I did post one of the tweets was a picture of Sidney Gottlieb saying, "Gosh, I'm going to really miss Fauci." So you might like that one.
Oh, that's a funny one. By the way, have you ever wondered if Sidney Gottlieb is related to Scott Gottlieb? You ever wondered?
I have considered, but it's a common name fairly. So who knows?
Yeah, I couldn't find. I went looking for it.
Yeah.
And I couldn't.
Well,
find it.
that's a pet peeve too, because CNBC every day and go, and here is Pfizer board member and former. Oh no, they'll say here's former FDA Commissioner Scott Gottlieb, and I'm always yelling at the TV. You mean you mean current Pfizer board member? They don't mention that. They just say former FDA Commissioner. He's on Pfizer's board.
Yeah, I know. It's awful. But I'm suffering total COVID fatigue at this point. So
yeah, me
once
too.
in a while, I'll see something that catches my eye. But, another stat showing that the deaths are up 50% in some country. Unless there was one of the COVID boys, Geert van den Bosch, came out and did his last announcement. He said, "This is my last public statement on COVID." And then he says, "You're all going to die in the fall."
The winter of death. Yeah.
And I'm going, okay, so put a timestamp on it. That's good. So I hope I'm around long enough to see the cascading failure begin. But
you're talking about from the vaccine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope not.
Yeah. I'm kind of not rooting for that one either. But
no.
Since I'm triple jab, that would be not good.
Ed Dowd made the case a few weeks ago. It's beginning to show up in the disability numbers.
Yeah.
I think it's bigly there.
Yeah,
but are they real disabilities or people who don't want to work?
That's the hard question to dive into. I think disabilities are up something like close to 40% from April 2020.
Yeah, which correlates precisely with purchase of new hot tubs.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that exhausts me now at this point. I probably wrote 200 pages on it.
We don't need to talk about that at all. I'm done with it too.
No, I'm just going down memory lane.
Oh yeah.
Well, it feels like we're in this lull period where the banking crisis from earlier this year has somewhat settled down. Inflation as measured by CPI is getting closer to the Fed's target. But yeah, it just seems like they're buying time to brush all this stuff under the rug.
So Rudy, it's a quiz because your encyclopedic memory of the olden days was staggering to me. But I read a book this year on the Florida real estate boom.
Yeah.
Which you probably read.
Yeah.
The banks started failing in 1925.
Yeah.
And they just laughed it off. Oh, that's the fucking Florida guys, right? They're just a bunch of yahoos, and they went off the deep end. And that's sort of just like, the Bear Stearns internal hedge funds. Who cares, right? And
right.
And then by within a few years, the southern region of the U.S. was getting pummeled with bank failures, and then 12,000 bank failures later, we were through the tough spot.
Yep. The book I read was called on that. It covered that. I haven't read the new one. I actually looked for it and I didn't get it, and then I forgot about it. But there's one called Only Yesterday by Frederick Lewis Allen, which people can probably get on archive.org, and it covers it's a great book. It's sort of like a contemporary history of the time that was written in the 30s. And then he wrote one called Since Yesterday that was about the 30s, and they're both great books. And he talks about the Florida bubble in the 20s. And it's, in fact, what I was posting clips from that book back 10 years ago, because there were so many passages in that book about the 20s and the 30s that you could take the whole paragraph and put it, today. And if you didn't tell people, they'd think that it's, I mean, it was from today. The Fed was messing with markets back then too, and there was a lot of similarities in the bubbles and manias. There's nothing new under the sun. I like to say, people, the old saying is history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And I've a number of times said, no, it repeats exactly. So that's my joke. It repeats exactly.
Mobius strip. It's a Mobius strip. And did you read? Here's one that I had to dig out of the dusty archives because it was not in print, called "Banking in the Business Cycle" by Phillips, McManus, and someone else. It was a great book. And then what happened is I read it. And I photocopied it because I said, fuck it, I need to have a copy of this thing. This is amazing. So turns out I sent a photocopy off to Ben Steele at the CFR.
Yeah.
And he said thanks. And then about 3 months later said, oh my God, that was an amazing book. I've highlighted, 3/4 of it. And I think it helped him write the Battle of Bretton Woods, which I've been told, I haven't seen a hard copy of it. Do you have the Battle of Bretton Woods? Do you have the book?
Oh, I probably do. Let me look. I was just looking. I have that book, Banking in the Business Cycle, 1937 cycle.
They reprinted it. So this is a new edition then. I think Lou Rockwell, or those guys or something, printed it again. It's just a brilliant treatise of the 30s. Turns out Battle of Bretton Woods, I'm told I'm in the acknowledgments section, which is a high point for me because I copy edited the book for him, which I like to do because then I read it really carefully, right? I really bear down and I can justify reading it very methodically if I'm copy editing it. So if I get a good book, I did it for another person too, and he didn't want the copy edit. So I'm going, you're a douchebag.
Yeah.
I'm doing you a big ass favor, and you just wanted me to say how wonderful your book is. You didn't want the copy edits. That's nuts. So, and I won't name him because he seems like a decent guy most of the time, but I picked up dickweed. I didn't like what I was seeing.
I get a lot of books off of, I'll be reading something. That's the problem I have with reading a book from cover to cover, because I'll read through 100 pages and then they'll talk about some book or some topic. And then I'll go, oh, that sounds interesting. So I'll go find it. And then I'll start reading that book. And then I'll be halfway through that and I'll go, oh, this is an interesting topic. And that's the problem. Everything is like a shiny butterfly, flying by. But I do like, and I always go to original sources. I always try to. And so I do have a copy of that business cycle book, and I have the 1937 version, which in PDF, which I'm sure I got off archive.org. And so a lot of times, Taleb's got a great quote about unread books, the library of unread books.
The unread library book, yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I have. I mean, I have a huge reference library, both physical books and online books. And to be honest, I haven't read a lot of them cover to cover, but I've certainly found the chunks, related them to other chunks, because all these things, history just keeps repeating in so many ways. And that's what I'd rather, it's like, instead of being like, I'm an expert, a mile deep in one subject, I'd rather be aware of a wide variety of subjects. The old classic liberal arts type education before the liberal arts education went insane. So archive.org is a great source. Anything like pre-1950 you can find there for free usually, or a lot of books.
Well, we have a library, so I can go do that. But
I have a real library too. But yeah.
No, I mean we have a library.
At Cornell, yeah,
Yeah. I'm trying to figure out how not to fuck up this computer. I'm moving around trying to get the bladder stone to cooperate. One of the disadvantages you have as being anonymous is people don't reach out to you. Now it's an advantage too, but what
do you mean? I get emails and I respond.
Well, you do now. The Substack really
that too.
Huge difference. But a lot of people reach out and said, oh, you ought to take a look at this. And for years, I've been so I cold called Grant Williams, for example, years ago.
Right.
It was an email and I just sent him shit. And we got tight. And then one day I drove down to New York City and spent the afternoon with him and Simon Mikhailovic, just chatting. It was so much fun. And so the digital world is really this amazing connectivity that's addicting, right? I mean, it's potentially
Grant too. Grant's like you. I mean, we found each other at least 10 years ago. And again, here's a guy I never would have known in a million years, if not for the Twitter. And I found what I liked about him. I think he was with Real Vision back then, right? So he was doing interviews. And the one thing I noticed about him is that he was very, I mean, he became, obviously a guest in his own right, but he would, when he interviewed people, and he had some just fantastic guests, he would let them speak. He would just sit there.
Shut up. He knew when to shut up.
Which you and I have a problem with, but Grant's very good at it, and so that was a fun podcast to start off with him. The only person I've ever talked to before, besides Grant and now you guys and Pomboy, is Mark Cahotas. So I'll give a shout out to Mark. Mark, over the years, reached out to me. I think at first he wasn't quite sure what to make of me, but then he was been very kind, and he actually he had sent his number to me over the years. Call me up. I'm going to, call me up. And I never called him because I had a policy of just not really, I would email back or something, but or text back, but I would never really call. So one day I called Mark, when I was banned, like March, April, May, around this year. And, cause I figured I'm never going back. It's like my 4th permanent ban. And I actually, talked to him. I said, "Hey, Mark, this is Rudy Havenstein." He's like, hey, Rudy, and so we just talked for a bit. So anyway, I just want to give a shout out. That's there's only a handful of people I've actually spoken to physically. So.
Well, he's been noticeably nice to me too. I mean, that's really kind of a funny small world, but I think he's one of these guys who if you can get above his bar, then he'll take the bullet for you. I think he's
a great guy. He's been very, very kind to me, and he had some kind words to say when I was banned,
and I sensed you were down. I sensed you were really. So I felt so bad. I was in a funk watching my Twitter feed without you there, and we're swapping emails and stuff. But I felt really bad during that period, and I eventually healed. And then you eventually showed back up. But it's like losing a dog or something, and. And I sense that you're going, because Twitter had become an important part of your existence, and it's so interactive, and all of a sudden it's like someone putting duct tape on your mouth. And
well, that's why Substack was a great fit, and to compliment them too, they were very nice. They, I was in contact with some of their technical support people early on when they were having some, growing pains, and I got no complaints, and I fully expect to keep posting there because it's great for long form. I saw Elon sent something out the other day saying, "Hey, we're going to do long form now." And I said, "Yeah, it's called Substack." I will say that, and Substack makes it very easy. And I never thought Twitter would be worse under Elon, because of Ajaya and Paraga and, those guys are just terrible. But the censorship, and that censorship has gone away. Like you can post something like, hey, I think, the COVID vaccine was not a good thing, and you're not insta-banned like you used to. But this whole $8 thing and the whole rate limited thing and the whole, it's like he should pay me $8 a month. It's like, I'm not going to pay him $8 a month. The main reason I'm not going to pay $8 a month? Because I want to keep changing my name. I do that all the time. Whatever comment is after my name on the account. So I guess you can't do that if you have Twitter Blue. So.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, like right now it's sunscreen and wood chips or something, so it's whatever I feel like at the moment.
Right now I'm Larry O'Donnell sucks.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah. Well, and he does though. That's objectively true.
He's not salty balls. He's one of the most wretched media guys out there. He's just
Did you ever see the clip of him where his crew was screwing up with the audio or something, and he lost his shit. He lost it. It was hilarious. I got to find that and dig it up because I love seeing these prima donnas, brought down a level or two.
But it's gotten so getting in sort of into the meat of the modern era. Our biggest problem? Actually, I think our very biggest problem is the collapse of the media, and the role it used to play. To call out the bad guys. Now, I've been reading a number of books, and we're going to talk hopefully about one of them that I didn't know you had read, and you commented. And I remember I asked you, I said, "Did you read that, or did you just go find the quote?" And you said, "Oh yeah, it's a good book." And but I've read books, and then all of a sudden you find out that back in the days when Woodward and Bernstein were outing Nixon and stuff, what they didn't tell you is that before Woodward was a journalist, he was CIA.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of that. Yeah.
He came into journalism out of nowhere, and I go, that was happening way back then, really?
Yes.
And so I didn't know that, and so I didn't know. But now journalism is completely and utterly collapsed, except for the Substacks and the Rumbles and the
Right.
stuff like that.
You've,
And they're letting
you've
down.
got CIA. You've got CIA and DIA former directors now as they show up on CNN and MSNBC as commentators. So they don't even need to hire journalists anymore. They just come on themselves and tell you the party line.
Yeah, Brennan would never lie.
Yeah.
I mean that.
Pieces of shit these guys are.
I mean, that's a part of U.S.
I did on Saturday with Cedric. My first half hour, I was just fucking mad. I just finished reading part of the Franklin scandal, and I was just fucking. I was shocked you'd read it because I didn't know you went into that shit.
Oh, I got a whole thread on that. I mean, it goes back years and years. You know, that's the worst thing about if you get banned from Twitter, then nobody can see all your threads. And even if you have your archive, you lose all. You might be able to find your individual tweets, but you can't find the threads. Have to be all pieced together forensically. So it's a real pain in the ass. It really screws everything up. So some of those threads, I mean, people are like, dude, you have this thread that goes on for like 200 and it goes back like 8 years or something. Well, yeah, that's a good one. You know, that, like I said, I posted today again a retweet, which most of my stuff now is just retweets. I need AI I could just go on a desert island now and just AI would retweet my good stuff. But the sole purpose of the account now is other than to amuse me, is as a resource for future historians. And that's exactly it. It's to amuse me, and because there's so much history in my account. I mean, I do screen grabs of, Hell is Coming with Bill Ackman. And I have screen grabs of, the market being down 12% in a day and things like that, and screen grabs of all the insanity over the last 10 years. And I don't think those exist really, and much of it doesn't exist anywhere else. So
do you store these independently? Because your retrieval skills are off the chart.
It's all keywords.
You just search by keyword in advanced Twitter search.
Like if I'm looking for a picture of, Yellen, I just do, Yellen asterisk. I mean, I'm in a DOS window.
Ugly old bag. You search ugly old bag and dumb.
No, I don't.
Put some keywords in.
And as for finding old posts, it's just keywords. And so I will search, from, you can search from Rudy Havenstein from your handle. Right. So if I want to, oh gosh, I remember this thing I posted about, Bob Rubin and Jeff Epstein. So I'll do a search for Rubin Epstein, and then it may or may not come up because Twitter search is deteriorated. But the archive, if you download your archive and use that to search, is much better than the actual online live search.
I'm not that tech savvy.
Yeah.
I don't know how to download the archive. But what I've noticed is there seem to be times where my Twitter is stepped on. Now, I don't know about you, but for me, Twitter was probably a maximized experience when I had, 400 followers. And some percentage of them were really interesting. My first Twitter follower ever was Jim Rickards.
Yeah.
And it was funny because I showed up on Twitter and I said, I went and found Rickards. I went and found Chris Whalen.
Oh yeah, I followed them. Yeah.
And the day that I went there, Jim Rickards was in a flame-throwing fight with Rubini, and they were basically picking on each other's mothers' asses and stuff. I mean, they were really going at it. And I wrote, Jim came here to find you, and Chris. War with Rubini, very strange medium, right? That was my first tweet, I think. Just very strange medium here. Yeah. Then he put out this obsequious sounding tweet that I didn't understand at the time, but I now realize in retrospect he was saying, follow this guy. But he said this very flattering thing, look forward to all your ideas. I'm going, well, Jim, I'm just telling you, but all of a sudden I had enough followers to initiate the program. And that's how I remember starting. There are days where I think I should just log off, but, and then I open up my computer and start tweeting. So there's that.
Mine's mostly producing, jokes and real content. And so I haven't noticed the same difference as you, because you probably used to engage with people and have long conversations and stuff. Like on DMs, I never DM. I mean, I'll DM like, you and Marty to like, okay, what time you want to do this? But I'm not on there going back and forth on DMs. I mean,
It's a waste of keystrokes.
Well, and I don't really engage other than just like I'll like I use likes as like as I acknowledge that you sent this to me. It's not necessarily an endorsement or something, but people, and that's the other thing I think a lot of what I did was I would actually respond to people. Hey, do you where did you get that chart, or what books did you get that from? And I'll actually respond. And I've had people like, because they have like 4 followers, and they're like, this guy. Oh, I used to have 4 followers too. So I mean, I'm not a snob like that, but it's like I've always tried to treat people, whether they're Chris Whalen or whether they're just some guy with an egg, nicely until proven otherwise. That's the thing about the race relations or whatever. I had a tweet one time. Here's your anti-bias tweet. Be nice to everybody unless they give you a good reason not to be, and your skin color is not a good reason. So I'm nice to everybody, and I get very few, considering 100,000 people. I get very few wackos, and they don't do well with me because usually I toy with them for a bit and then they're gone. But so I don't get a lot of the grief.
I try not to block because part of it I don't want to give them the satisfaction.
Yeah, so I think muting's worse.
I mute.
It's worse because then they're screaming at you and they don't know that you don't see it.
Right. One day I was having an exchange with this woman named Jessica Vaughn, who's hundreds of thousands of followers, and she's hotter than a pistol, some ex-Miss USA pageant winner or something. And she said, I don't hit like because I think it's necessarily good,
Right.
And I followed that with I hit like to acknowledge that I heard them.
Right.
And
that's what I do.
And if you're going to read the tweet, you might as well take that extra 100 microseconds and click the like box. And
I have the same plus.
They're just dying to be heard, right? Especially in the modern era, especially in this world, the above the din, someone actually read what you had to say. So I think it's a positive thing.
Yeah, and if I get someone that like sends me like just look today and something funny or something perceptive, I'll retweet it. So RT it because then they're like, gosh, this, and I'm like, I'm just like you. I put my pants on one leg at a time. And they're and you know what? I remember when Zero Hedge years ago would start retweeting some of my stuff, and it made a huge difference in followers. And
do you remember fair enough back when Zero Hedge you'd go to their site, there'd be like 4 comments? I mean, I remember when they just started.
Well, I always avoided the comments at Zero Hedge, to be honest.
Well, but they were okay at one point because they were so far back to irrational people. And then what happened, they all skedaddled over to Twitter and left the neo-Nazis to shout.
Right. Yeah, and I'm no fan of them either. Yeah, I started reading Zero Hedge back in the day, and people would give it crap, especially the blue checks, as I call them back then, and I would say, you know what? I don't take investing advice from Zero Hedge. I don't take, I take it as a grain of salt. There's wheat and chaff in there, but it's a lot of times years ago, they were providing, here's this report from JP Morgan that we're just going to publish in full. And I'm like, I have no access to that. And I know most people don't. I thought that was really cool. And
I think they're still actually very good. You still have to bring and they're also an outlet for people to leak shit, people who do have dirt.
Yeah, no, they're great. I got no complaints and I'm a fan, but it's like my joke, when I quote somebody, I am endorsing every single thing they have ever said, written, or done, because it's so absurd. One time, I mean, I've quoted all sorts of people, I'll quote Chomsky. Okay. He's got some good quotes before he went insane in COVID and knowing Epstein too, but he does have some good points. So I will highlight on occasion, and I have in the past, some good points from him. That does not mean that I support all the other stuff. The same thing with anybody. I could quote Robert F. Kennedy Jr. I could quote Donald Trump. I could quote, Nancy Pelosi if she ever happened to say something intelligent. But, it doesn't mean I'm in favor of everything. So,
well, I do quote Nancy Pelosi. Let her hang herself.
Well, Kamala's the one that does that. I like to just watch her ramble on. But
I call her Kamala doing Dr. Seuss. Yeah. Here's the thing that people should take seriously, though. I was on a doctor Zoom group who formed when COVID showed up, and these were docs saying, "Holy shit, this is a screwed up story," and they became very anti-vaxxers. And they had anyone who was anyone in COVID. They had them through. They had Kennedy, they had Scott Atlas, they had everybody through. And there's this one guy who was a national security analyst, and I didn't know it. And one day he's starts babbling about Hegelian philosophy, and I'm going, "Oh, Stephen, well, whoever this guy is going off the rails today." And then it started making sense. And then someone chimed in and said, "Stephen, are you a professor of philosophy or something?" Because there's about 150 people, so we didn't all know each other. And he said, "No, I'm a lawyer, but I used to work for the National Security Agency, and turns out the Arabs follow Hegelian philosophy. And if you want to understand what they're saying, you got to understand Hegelian philosophy. And then it makes sense. It would be like trying to understand the Wokies without knowing what intersectionality meant, right? Things like that."
Yeah.
And one day I asked him, I said, "Who's the they, right? How many times have we heard the word they referring to some amorphous bunch of badasses?" And he said, "I don't like to name them because it makes it too easy to then dismiss it." And so you say, "Well, Bill Gates." And then you say, "Okay, that's fine. We now know Bill Gates is evil. What's for dinner?" And you move on. Yeah. And so it shuts down the conversation. So I extrapolated that from that to also don't ever say someone's stupid. Because, especially in a position of power, because that's being said for some reason. And as dumb as Kamala is, and I had dinner with an uber famous hedge fund manager about, 2 months ago, and he said he met her, and he said, there's stupid and there's Kamala. And he said, unimaginably stupid. But someone's writing her speeches. Right. And they're the stupidest speeches. And you go, but you could hire a 14-year-old from a prep school in England who would be able to write better speeches than that, right? Yeah. And they're writing very bad speeches for her, and there's some reason. There is.
Yeah, I don't know. I said the other day that it appears to me like the Biden administration, everyone they appoint is like they think to themselves, who's the worst possible person we can appoint for this position, and they do that, like the luggage guy or somebody like that. Hang on before everybody turns off the radio. I said that about the Trump administration too. I mean, he's bringing in Bill Barr and Bolton and Gary Cohn and all that. So I'm bipartisan. I think that's another thing I really try to be is bipartisan because. The Republican Party blew up not under Trump, but under George W. Bush, in Iraq and that whole Patriot Act and all that. That was all under Bush. And then Obama came in and, I thought he was going to be, well, like I said, I used to listen to his speeches and then I realized they didn't mean anything. So he was a complete failure. He was probably an intentional failure. Pam Martin's, Wall Street on Parade. They wrote a great article in like March of 2008 explaining the purpose of the Obama administration. And it was basically to act as a cleanup crew. I'll post that again, or I'll send it to you. It's the most prescient description of what Obama was. Because then he came in, he put in Holder, who was the guy who introduced Too Big to Jail. Nobody went to jail. Right. And if Obama would have come in 08 or 09, in January 09 and said, you know what, DOJ, go after all these guys, all the fraud, it'll be like the 1980s. We'll have 3,000 criminal referrals and we'll send executives to jail. If that had happened and we'd broken up some of the banks and we hadn't given them tens of billions of dollars of TARP money to pay bonuses, if we'd done all that and we'd reformed it and backstopped the taxpayers, backstopped the depositors, I know, but there's no reason that Lloyd Blankfein should be a billionaire today. He should have been out on his ass. He was a hedge fund manager that failed, and then he magically became a Fed-backed bank along with Morgan Stanley in 2008. And so if Obama and Holder would have done all that, we would never have had Trump, ever. That's my point.
Not even close.
And And then so Trump makes Trump, as I have a whole thread on this too that goes back to 2017. He comes in, here's this buffoonish guy, famous people know him. What does he do? He starts criticizing the bankers. People are like, whoa, he's criticizing Wall Street. Whoa, wait a minute. Hey, he's criticizing George W. Bush and Dick Cheney and their wars. People are like, wow, this guy. So he's getting left, right, and middle. He's getting, I think, a significant amount of minority people that supposedly, according to the media, hated him. I think a lot of them loved him. And he came in, and then within days of becoming president in January of, 2017, he starts bringing in Goldman Sachs to run his administration. And I think people were like, boom, boom, boom. They're getting punched to the face left and right, under Bush, under Obama, under Trump. And then if you notice, just to continue here, there's a tweet I have of, in one single day in the middle of 2020, there's like 40 top Democratic officials that either throw their support to Joe Biden or they leave the race, candidates leaving the race all on the same day and endorsing Joe Biden. And basically that was anybody but Sanders. And of course, Sanders.
When Warren and all these guys, Tulsi Gabbard, everyone threw it in all on one day.
Tulsi Gabbard. Ron Paul never endorsed Donald Trump. Ron Paul didn't endorse George W. Bush, but Gabbard endorsed Biden. Chomsky endorsed Biden. I mean, all these people endorsed Biden. Why not just not endorse anybody? But to endorse Biden, I mean, Biden was a big fan, got the Patriot Act passed. Biden was a big fan of the Iraq War. You might as well just elect Dick Cheney, honestly, except for the woke stuff, which Biden has gone. I never expected that Biden would be this insane with that stuff. But I guess the worst people of the Obama administration are running the show here. Clearly, Joe's not in charge, and clearly Kamala's not in charge. So I don't know who's quite in charge. Is it the Citigroup people again, like Michael Froman, who picked Obama's cabinet? I mean, basically, we keep going from Citigroup to Goldman Sachs to Citigroup running the country.
Klain is the name that I keep hearing occasionally. Let me do a pathetically sad defense of Trump relative to Biden.
Okay.
Now, I agree with everything you said about Trump. The difference between Trump and Biden is that Trump's people, although evil and crooked and corrupt, Biden's people are unimaginably incompetent, right? There's nothing going on up there in any of them, best I can tell. And so I think we're at greater risk having utterly incompetent people running the country than having competent, corrupt people running the country. I'm not sure that's true.
So what a choice to have.
It is a wonderful choice. Now, let's go to Kennedy.
Yeah.
Is Kennedy a Manchurian candidate? What is he? What's Kennedy, in your opinion?
Well, I've been listening to his podcast for
Tons.
a while, and he had great guests. And I take issue with the anti-vaxxer slur because I was called in. I got 2 Pfizer vaccines in April of 21, and for reasons that were personal. So I was protecting other people, I believed at the time, and then I got called in. And then because I was anti-mandate, I was always 1,000% anti-mandate. I was called a anti-vaxxer, and I'm like, what is that? It's just like the other day. This is great. There's an article in the Diplomat, which I don't, for some reason, is on my news feed. And they were talking about, pro-Russian Vietnamese criticize U.S. use of cluster bombs. And I read through the article like, okay, pro-Russian, what there is, that was the only statement mentioning, there's no support like these Vietnamese have traveled to Russia and they support Putin. No, they're pro-Russian because they're against cluster bombs. So the Diplomat is giving Vietnamese people a hard time for being against cluster bombs. Does no one have a memory of anything? Do you not know what we did to Vietnam and Cambodia? Like today, the Diplomat, same magazine I posted, drives me insane. Oh, the U.S. is going to withhold some aid and things to Cambodia because we're not happy with their election. I mean, haven't we done enough to Cambodia? It's like that great Anthony Bourdain quote. Again, this is all just like boom, boom, boom.
Another dead guy.
The other day. No, he said, once you've visited Cambodia, you never want to stop beating Henry Kissinger to death with your own hands. And that's Anthony Bourdain. You know, he visited Cambodia. He saw what they're still suffering from over there from the war. And the amazing thing is that the people of Vietnam, I live near a number of them, are some of the greatest, most pro-American people. And I know friends, I've never been to Vietnam. I actually would like to go there. but they say they love Americans over there. I mean, by and large, and they have great reason not to, and yet, they're great people, and Cambodians and the Laotians and everyone else has suffered. And that's all forgotten. People don't remember what happened before 2009. There's no memory. I don't know. I don't know.
And I think I would have to say, and I remember you sort of hinting at, at one point you had sort of a moderate neocon streak in you, which was me too. Yeah. So, when Reagan showed up, one thing that was really noticeable is the United States was very down on itself, right? It was really in a pathetic state. We dealt with, double-digit inflation. The Arab oil embargo was beating the shit out of us. You had Banana Republic dictators pissing all over the president of the United States verbally. And Reagan got elected, and he went over and whacked Gaddafi and killed his son and basically said, quit fucking with us. And then the air traffic controllers went on strike, and they can't. And they said, we're going to do it anyways. And he fired them all. And I go, at the time, that was a very important labor management shove, because labor had gotten way too cocky and way too unaware of the downside of strikes. And so we needed Reagan at the time. I really am nervous that I've underestimated the darkness underneath Reagan's administration. I know it's there. Yeah. I mean, the CIA's there, the FBI's there. How could there not be darkness there? But I think Reagan knew about the dark. His inner circle included Roy Cohn. You can't get worse than that.
That's right. Well, Trump's mentor.
So tell me about him being Trump's mentor, because I hear that phrase, but was he his mentor in a very serious way, or was it just some guy who sort of crossed paths with Trump when Trump was young?
I think it went beyond. They were photographed one time together at a party. I mean, again, I'll defer to Whitney Webb. She's wrote, for people that can't handle a 900-page book. And I could send it out again. I guess when I re-listen to this, I'll start tweeting out some of the things that I'm talking about. But she wrote a series of 4 articles that basically went from the very beginning of Epstein's origin stories, which doesn't even involve Epstein. This goes back to World War II, and when we were the government would align with the mob. Mafia or whatever, but they were Jewish, they were Italian, Sicilian, and they would to fight the Nazis. And you're like, okay. Or to fight the Japanese, we would ally with the Kuomintang or whatever, what became right. Taiwanese. They were major opium dealers over there, and we were side by side with them on that, our government. And you can say, okay, we're beating the Japanese, we're fighting the Nazis, so it's defensible. That we're teaming up with bad guys because we're fighting worse guys, and I can understand that, but that never ended. It
got worse because
it got worse.
We became the bully, right?
Well, no, I mean that there's the partnership between organized crime and the United States government is as strong as ever.
Well, the thing people don't understand, they think that somehow organized crime formed an alliance with the CIA. The CIA was built. The cornerstones of the CIA were organized crime. The very beginnings of
the beginning, that's what Whitney's talking about. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah,
and so I'm about to start volume 2 of her book, literally today. Yeah. I'm finishing up the book. I'm finishing up the Franklin Scandal book.
Oh. And you need to get out in the sunshine.
Oh
go take a walk.
Oh my God! I think that's why I was so goddamn mad on Saturday. But but I'm going to part 2. Whitney Webb's books are not easy reads.
No, they're not. They're reference books, I think. They're reference.
That's right. And what people criticize her for not telling the story, right? The story. It's not. You're not reading McCullough's books, or not McCullough, the storytellers. There are guys who can write books and tell great stories.
I think people who say she doesn't tell the story are lazy. She tells the story.
That's why it's a lot of work, though, because
Exactly.
You're getting bombarded with names. So what Whitney does is I view her as a puzzle assembler. She pieces puzzles together, and she says person A knows person B, who happened to also be the lawyer of person C, and it's a huge amount of work. And I find, speaking of lazy, what I find myself doing is not saying, okay, what's that person's name, but saying, corporate CEO. I just kind of lump the person in there and say, okay, corporate CEO knows congressman. And I kind of reduce it down to something a little more memorable. I'm hoping the second volume, the players will be, have you read the whole thing?
I read two chapters and I wrote on it, and that took days and days to do that. So no, like I said, it's something shiny came up, I'm off to the next book. But I do recognize that if I need, I've gone back to it. Like if I want to read about Bob Rubin or Larry Summers, get more color, although I have a ton of color on them over the years. I just go to her book and see what I haven't found yet. Hers is a treasure. It's a resource. It's a resource book.
That's right. It's thorough as hell. It is thorough as hell.
To me, there are books. It's not a book you read left to right. You don't start at the beginning and go to the end. But I did with the first two chapters and wrote on it.
So I was actually starting to dig into pedophilia as a topic, not a hobby. And then this year it picked up. And all of a sudden I go, oh boy, this seems to be the year, right? And so all of a sudden the Sound of Freedom shows up, and I said, okay, I got to accelerate my pursuit of this. And I'm like you, I like the overview stuff. I don't want to be. I went to a hedge fund manager's dinner once, a founder's dinner, in some rascaller in the basement in New York City. I drove there just to have dinner, and I was struck by these guys, although good at what they do, were incredibly siloed in their thinking. Mm-hmm. And the only guy who seemed to have an overview, the only guy I could see now, I was told there's a guy named Lasry there, and I've been assured he's very good. But Einhorn was the only one that had this sort of capacity to look at the big picture. And the rest were like, some vol derivatives trader or something, and they knew everything you needed to know. But we started talking about inflation, they were lost. I'd rather paint an impressionist painting of what I'm seeing than the absolute minutia.
Yeah, I agree. It's unpleasant and it's discouraging if you get into it, that sort of thing.
Well, so my pursuit of the pedophiles, by the way, is I've been groping to understand why there are so many people in the country and in the world who seem to be willing to make decisions and do things that are antithetical not only to the basic principles of the United States, right? Just the basic premise that we all kind of agreed, we are special, we are de Tocqueville's United States of America. They seem to be willing to throw that under the bus completely, and even sort of self-destructive. And I just couldn't figure out what upside is there to doing that?
How many people seriously want to get rid of the First Amendment right now in the United States? Probably 40%.
Why? Oh, I think it's higher.
It's insane. Last week, they were openly calling for it.
Yeah. And whatever happened to liberals? What they my experience, classical liberal or any liberal, you were anti-war generally, and you were pro free speech and pro civil rights. And now it's like it's the opposite, and it's insane. The Bill of Rights is all we have, and so many, especially young people, who have just had horrible parents who raised them and horrible teachers, think that the First Amendment, think that free speech is like is something to get rid of. It's frightening. It's frightening.
Yeah, I mean, to add context, like the last 30 minutes of conversation. I mean, I'm a millennial. So I'm a product of 9/11. I was 10 when that happened. Might as well just
slice your wrist now, You guys are the worst PR agent.
We're gonna be fine.
Or like a meme at this point. It's not fair. It's not fair. No. I'm saying that the millennial is a pejorative. It's like a conspiracy theorist. We're all proud of it, but everyone else thinks we're dicks.
Yeah, but I think I represent a subset who have really been jaded by the political process specifically. Again, 9/11 happened quickly after the Patriot Act, the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And then not too long after that, 2008, the bailouts, TARP, all that bullshit. And in between then, you have like the WikiLeaks really highlighting like, hey, these people are beyond corrupt. And going back to the conversation about presidents, whether it's Obama, Trump, Bush 1, Bush 2, or Biden, like they don't run the show. It's these intelligence agencies that are really pulling the strings behind the stage. And that's why, like, when it comes to what's the comparison of Trump and Biden, like, I just think it's completely misguided conversation. It's all limited hanging
Well,
out.
it is. But here's what scares me. What scares me is think of, for example, the Cuban Missile Crisis. Love Kennedy, hate Kennedy, doesn't matter. The fact that we had one guy in charge of ultimately making the call, I think was important. I think that was a critical part. Glenn Greenwald wrote an article within the last year saying that this situation now where it's this amorphous shootout in some war room somewhere and Biden doesn't know what's going on and Harris doesn't know what's going on, it's a very dangerous situation. We need an Eisenhower, we need a Kennedy, we need a Jimmy Carter. For that matter, I'd take Barack Obama, because I don't think that I have trouble with a lot of aspects of his presidency, but the one thing, I think he had the chops that if he had to make a real tough call, I think he could probably do it. Biden can't do it. He doesn't know what's going on.
Certainly not. But going back to the Cuban Missile Crisis and JFK, maybe he was like the last president that could actually do it, because he, I think, noticed that the CIA and the intelligence apparatus was trying to take control behind the scenes, and vocalized that and got his brains blown out.
Kind of funny coincidence, that, huh? Yeah.
Well, so then you read that Dan Rather was the only guy to actually see the full Zapruder footage showing that he got his brains blown out from in front of the car instead of behind. And just the other day, I read something, I'm not recalling it, I don't have the Havenstein photographic memory, but someone was writing about something else that Rather knew, and he shut his goddamn mouth about. And
can you imagine? Well, he was probably threatened with what everyone else was threatened with. You know, you didn't see that. Don't ever say that again. There's the guy that ran the JFK Records Commission. Again, I'm going to resend this out. He went through everything. And all the evidence. And he talks about how many people that day or witnesses came to him years later and said, I told the FBI that I was positive he was shot from the front. I was on the grassy knoll. The bullet went over my head. And the FBI, none of that was in the Warren Commission report. The head of the JFK Records Act said that. The FBI, you know how it would work. Hey, no, Dave, you did not see that. Well, yeah, I did say, well, Dave, listen, I noticed you're a professor at Cornell University. Do you want to remain a professor? Do you want your family to be homeless? That's what they would say. And then the people go, okay, I didn't see it. I don't think the bullet came from the front.
Well, this is, by the way, why this Franklin scandal book that I'm reading is so disturbing. Mm-hmm. Because for those who haven't read it, and I don't recommend you read it unless you're safe around sharp objects, basically it was a pedophile ring running out of Nebraska. And it looks like a sort of a penny ante ring in some sense, right? It doesn't look like a big ring, except for the fact that and all the witnesses are a bunch of crackheads, because, by the way, they got it up the ass when they were 5 years old. So, you end up being crackheads, and, your life gets crushed by this. But the horrifying connection was this wasn't a bunch of Omaha, Nebraskan, which, by the way, I'm thinking, was Buffett in there? This wasn't a bunch of Omaha guys who were just pervs, because the cover-up went through the chief of police, who was a perv, the attorney general of the state shut it down. The FBI completely stepped on all the witnesses, destroyed their lives. They tried to convict one of the most prominent ones of perjury, to make it very, very clear. By the way, one of my theories is you never want to be called a whistleblower. You can be a whistleblower on Walmart. You get labeled a whistleblower, they have to destroy you, because they want you to say, never be a whistleblower on anything. Mm. And so whistleblowers, the name is like saying, oh, just shoot me now. And so in any event, so the cover-up reached all the way, and they said inner circles of the White House. They said it went. So to me, I go, okay, that must be Roy Cohn. And then it's the cover-up was so bleak. And then it made it to the Supreme Court of Nebraska, and they put a judge in there against the rules of judginess, who wasn't supposed to be able to be a Supreme Court judge because he's still an active lawyer. And they said, oh, fuck it, we're going to do it anyways. And then the judge was just a complete and utter sack of shit throughout the entire trial.
Yeah.
And you're going, the problem is not just that there's pervs. The problem is that the cover-up was so monumentally large for a bunch of kids getting it up the butt in Nebraska.
Yeah, well, that's why I say True Detective was a documentary. You know, I wish I just rewatched. Both season 1 and 2, by the way. Yeah.
Where I'm going with all this shit is it explains how. So now you take Nebraska, and you simply expand it to the size of the world, and you then realize that you don't need to have everyone compromised. You just need enough people compromised where the uncompromised people say, "Look, I can't do it." Great example, right? 41,000 hours of tapes in the White House for January 6th. Where are they? There's people rotting in jail, people rotting in prison, people rotting in solitary confinement. It's already been shown that people would be getting out of jail if those 41,000 hours were released, yet they haven't been released. So the people who are refusing to release them are treasonous, in my opinion.
Well, most things that are classified information, I think, are classified to protect people from embarrassment or prosecution.
Right.
I mean, I said that many years ago, you know, so that's obvious. I don't know. Getting back to Marty's point about tough time to come of age. Yeah, because I remember, I think that goes back to Dave's point about the media, because like when I was growing up, come home from school, one black and white TV with 3 channels, and the news was on, and the news back then was Vietnam, and you saw the war, and you saw people get, correspondents in with the troops getting shot at. You saw body bags, you saw napalmed civilians, and you'd have at night somebody like Cronkite come on and talk very soberly, and he wasn't trying to push anyone's buttons. I don't think he just was reporting the news. And what you have today is a complete clown show where everybody is, I mean, you got to be honest, 95% of mass media, not people like you guys or, you're some of the alt media people, but 95% of the media personalities are in the tank for Kamala and Joe. And that's fine. I'm sure the percentages were pretty high back 50 years ago too. And you've got the Fox Newses and the various offshoots for the other side. And all they want to do is get you amped up and push your buttons, and they don't care. Like I joke, you could have a headline that says, Trump eats babies or Biden eats babies, and you're going to have people clicking that. You're going to have the people who are clicking it going, yeah, that's right, he does. I hate that guy. And you're also going to have the people clicking it who say, that's outrageous that they would say that. How could they do that? And they're going to click too. And that's all they care about is they got your clicks, they got your ads. And so that's why, honestly, like the whole thing with the January 6th thing and all that, I don't watch cable news anymore. Ever since Trump was elected and I saw where it was going after he won at Russia, which is, I think, complete idiocy. But anyway, I just don't watch any cable news. And it's the single best decision because there are all sorts of things going on that everyone's outraged about that I'm kind of aware of it because I can read, but I don't have my buttons pushed. And I remember having my buttons pushed, different ways. And it's very nice. And I recommend that to everyone because you're really not going to miss out on anything. Don't watch any cable news. Don't watch Fox. Don't watch MSNBC. And even the nightly news during COVID, honestly, got so woke. The 3 or 4 stations that I had access to, I just gave pretty much up on that. I'm like, I got a friend who says, he gets up and he looks at the news in the morning. Are we at war? No? Okay. That's it. He just wants to know if we're at war or not. And that's, I think, a much healthier way to go through life because, bottom up, look after your family, look after your community, and forget about, Kevin McCarthy and Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi and all everybody. They're not interested in you, so why be interested in them? Anyway, kind of nihilistic. And who to vote for? Like, who do I always vote for? I vote for Ron Paul. Okay, Ron Paul's not running anymore, really, but I still write him in, or maybe I'll write in my candidate, Jim Grant. I mean, I mentioned in the thing, I voted for Obama in 2008 because I was naive, I guess. I believed him, and he lied. And then, but I haven't voted for anybody that wins in like forever. I'm just kind of used to it. I like RFK, some of it. I know he has huge baggage, unlike Trump and Biden, of course, who have no baggage. But you can tell this is the thing now. Anything that the people I can't stand, the Anderson Cooper types of the media, and also, anybody that I can't stand. You guys probably know the type. There's probably some overlap.
We do.
I see who they hate, who they really hate. And then I go, okay, I'm gonna look into that person, and maybe there's a valid reason, but generally that's the person you want to look at there. I mean, like remember Brexit, the world's gonna end. And then no, I had no interest in breakfast. I'm not British. And then I look and see the lineup of Davos crowd goofballs who are saying, oh, the world's going to end, literally going to end if Brexit passes. And I go, oh, okay, that's interesting. Anyway.
Cool. But then nothing happened. So they voted Brexit, and I don't see where there's any Brexiting going on.
Well, they overturn elections now, just sort of de facto.
Here's the absurdity. So you have Kennedy, who has his baggage.
Right.
But he comes out of the Camelot tradition. So there's that. And there's a lot of people who like that idea. He seems to be committed to the idea of trying to tell the truth. And I've watched enough of his podcast to see that he really tries to straighten out things that he said before and clarify them and things like that. He was on the right side of most of the COVID story. I don't think he was psychotic. I actually think the autism connection is real at this point. I completely flipped. I thought he was nuts on that, and I've completely flipped on that. And he's going against a guy who is 80 years old, clearly demented, pretty good evidence he was molesting his own daughter, sniffing the hair of girls and saying shit to them that anyone who knows anything about predators says that's classic predatory behavior. Legitimate looking accusation of rape that went nowhere, and selling the United States on the river to Ukraine, to China, to you name it, and somehow he's, I don't see how a party picks him. The fact that a party would pick him, this is not a shiny bauble they're handing to us, right?
You don't think there's any possible way that the DNC would allow Robert F. Kennedy to be the Democratic candidate?
No chance. But the point being is, what he does represent is this juxtaposition of candidates.
Right. Oh yeah, it's like, who's the least bad candidate? I mean, by a mile, it's him, in my opinion. I mean,
he's so far from Biden, right? You could go into the phone book and randomly throw a dart at it and come up with someone better than Biden.
Well, I keep referring to my pinned tweet, which is, I'm against the banksters and I'm against the warmongers. And to me, everything else flows out of that. So if I liked Gabbard originally because I thought her foreign policy was great. And then I probably disagree with her on 75% of the other things. Same thing with Kennedy, maybe, or something. But my top issues are so important to me that I'm willing to overlook other things and try and find common ground. And that's what I try and do. Like, a lot of my followers are very left wing. They're much, far to the left of Biden or Kamala. They're not even, I don't know what they are. They're just opportunists. And then I have very right wing, very pro Trump followers and friends, and very liberal friends. I have a lot of friends who were big Hillary Clinton supporters, and so I can get along with everybody. I try to find common ground. Let's not argue so much about what we disagree on. Let's find some common ground. And it's scary that something like free speech or not being an evil empire is not common ground anymore. It's bizarre.
Well, I think it is common ground amongst most people, but like the way the media and those in control, particularly the DNC, project it, gives it more, makes it seem bigger than.
That's excellent point. Excellent point.
Generation below yours, Marty, I think you actually start finding real problems. So the millennials get a bad rap, but you got to remember the boomers, right? Rudy's in my generation. We brought drugs into the world. We were a handful for our parents. So for us to bitch about the millennials is insane to me. But the Gen Zers, I think, really do have lost the thread. Part of the problem is that they're the first generation, I think, that started getting indoctrinated from daycare. And that's really the problem.
What age is Gen Z that you're talking about? What would that be
And I
roughly?
kind of put Gen Z in the sort of the late 20s zone now. I could be wrong about this, but
Yeah.
what I see in our grad students is even the most thoughtful grad students who seem like reasonable individuals, I still see things that they just don't seem to get at all.
These are
And
chemistry grad students?
yeah, and
Okay.
and the Jonathan Haidt theory is that in coddling the American mind, is that the kids who showed up on campuses as freshmen in 2014 were just different. They're just different. Period.
Yeah.
Different.
Yeah.
There was a phase change, and
Yeah. Well, I will speak up for the 20 and 30-year-olds because I know a number of them that are just outstanding people with doing wonderful work. And I kind of hope that Marty's right, that it's just that, nobody's going to put on TV on the 9 o'clock news. Hey, this person graduated from school and paid down their debt, and now they're helping people as a doctor, an ER doc. You're not going to see that, but they're going to see some goofball who's complaining, about some. I mean, there's a lot of great people of young people out there, and there's not the ones we generally see on the news or on social media. We get the freaks and we get the attention seekers and the malcontents, and there's a lot of good people out there. I'll defend the young people.
Yeah. People ask me about life at Cornell, and I go, you don't see on campus what supposedly we're supposed to be seeing everywhere.
Yeah.
There are different places with different psyches. So I'm told, for example, there are famous chemistry departments that are woke up the kazoo.
Yeah.
You really can't go through a day without getting hit with wokey shit. But most of the kids are there trying to learn how to make robots and shit. Of course, they'll
Right.
They'll go to what is it that Dynamics robot company and make killer robots, but that's a separate issue. And the horror story, the ones who go and spend $250,000 studying something that will never extinguish their student loan. And so there really are majors that should not exist or should be so rare. And again, it's back to the stupid money. In a podcast, someone said, maybe it was the Saturday one where he talked about dumb money. I said, all the money's dumb now. When you flood the world with that much money, it all becomes stupid money.
Sure.
So the kids are doing stupid things with their opportunity. What I have noticed is changes in their work ethic. And there's a funny phenomenon, which turns out, I think, to be important. And so one of the problems with our young grad students right now is that they got an important part of their education. In fact, every kid got an important part of their education during the lockdown. So imagine you were trying to read behind a mask, right? And your teacher was behind a mask and you're in first grade. Imagine the damage we did to those kids. It is unmeasurable what we did to those kids. But you take a kid who's a first-year grad now. They took a lot of their college courses, Zoom calls and bullshit presentations. And I don't know about you, but I learned how to go to college, and I don't think they did. So one of the things I noticed in my courses, is I teach a course. I taught 2 grad courses last semester, which is almost unprecedented. No one does that, but I did. They study different, and it's really a fundamental problem. So I'll build up a case. So I'll start at ground zero and say, here's the most basic principles of the field, and then I start building on it. And it was only towards the end of one of the courses that I noticed that they weren't keeping up at all. And I realized that the way they studied is imagine the semester's fragmented by a bunch of exams and a bunch of problem sets. They would aim at the next target right in front of them. And they would do nothing, and they'd hit that target. And then the next target would come up, the next exam, they'd aim at that target. Meanwhile, you're lecturing to them, but they're not keeping up. They're not studying. And so by the end, I've built this sort of superstructure of supposed knowledge. And since they haven't started studying yet, because my exam has not become the thing right in the road, right in front of them, they didn't know anything. And I realized I could have headed off at the past if I had noticed. I could have said, here's what this year I will say, here's what I saw last year. This is not the way to go to college. And I talk about stuff like this. I talk about how to write research grants. I talk about what it takes to get tenure. They don't understand that at all. I talk about what it takes I talk about the idea of why it's important to learn how to write. Of course, now there's ChatGPT. And I talk about all sorts of life lessons. You can imagine me not being able to control it. And in previous years, I used to get rave reviews nonstop for all the great stories about, like I told you before the podcast, where I was drinking ginger ale and pissing into a cup and I grabbed the wrong glass and took a belt out of it. I would tell them that story, right? I would tell them how I took quantum mechanics, graduate level physics without any calculus. And the message is, and I'm somehow still here, right? I'm standing in front of your classroom. So you can fuck up royally and still make it. So there's a lot of messages in my stories. And this group, in their questionnaires, they called them interruptions. They didn't call them jokes. They didn't call them stories. They called them interruptions. And I'm going, boy, that's a different world. There's something that's fundamentally different here. And I don't know if others are experiencing that. I talked to a woman from Ithaca College who, in the summer, was doing some other job. And she was saying, oh, yeah, the kids are completely different. I don't even know how to reach them at this point. I don't know how to do it. So we do have a problem. I wore bell-bottom jeans too. Did a lot of drugs. Drank a lot. Got in trouble.
What does Marty want to talk about?
Yeah.
I completely agree. And I think that's the nature of these kids growing up in the internet age and social media. Kids learn everything on TikTok these days, whether that's a good idea or not. That's what they're doing. And there's so many distractions. Bad parenting. And then, bringing it back to the context of where we are generationally, I do believe there is some validity behind the fourth turning stuff and going back to politics and voting in a new president to meet the new boss, same as the old boss. I think everything that's out there right now is meant to distract from the main problem in our society, which is that we fucked up the money, and all these negative effects that we're talking about are just negative externalities from that core point. They want you believing in the Russian scandal. They want you believing that Biden and Kamala are completely incompetent and debating and fighting over that when nobody ever brings up the monetary policy or the debt situation.
Do you think,
Marty,
right. Do you think, I was going to mention the fourth turning earlier in our chat because I agree with you 100% on that. Neil Howe's got a new book out, I'm told. I just listened to a podcast of his. And fourth turning is kind of funny because years ago I wrote about it. I mentioned it. And Einhorn, who reached out to me one day, we become very good friends, asked me my opinion. I hadn't finished the book yet. I did a Rudy move on it. I read some pile of pages, then found a squirrel running by me and I chased that. But then I said, oh, fuck, I got to read it. And then I'm sort of trying to get started. And he says, well, what do you think? And I go, oh, fuck, now I really got to read it. That happened to be the other day in a biography by Steve Hanke. And I finished it and I told him what I thought. It's kind of loosely formed ideas in some sense, right? I mean, it's like trying to make it all very systematic in what's in maybe not so systematic world, but there's something to it, this idea of generational rollover like that. And one of the arguments is that, like Rudy said, that, if we had just dealt with the bankers, to the extent the fourth turning started, let's say it started, I don't think it started with the crisis. I think it started with the response to the crisis. That's exactly Rudy's point, I think. And the problem is you can call it a fuck up, but you can also say the fourth turning was due. And the fuck up was due. And the reason you step forward with your left foot is because you were done stepping with your right foot. And there was no choice. And we were going to fuck up and go into a fourth turning, and how it looked might have taken on different shapes. But it still was going to be 20 years of a clusterfuck. Now, the risk is if we're only 10 years in, then the next 10 is going to be a humdinger of a 10 years. It's going to be CBDC, which is going to try to swallow your world, Marty, and they're going to try to swallow the world of the rest of us too, who are not yet hodling and stuff like that. So, it feels to me like somehow the United States is going to have some gigantic default, which will involve Raytheon and McDonnell Douglas and companies like that.
we're in the middle of a giant default. It's called inflation.
But I think it's going to be worse than that even. I mean,
I agree, but you can either go.
You're not going to chip at it.
It's inflation is just a slower motion default. These people, it's incomprehensible to me that a serial arsonist like Janet Yellen is now fire marshal at the U.S. Treasury Department. I mean, how does that happen? We have the same people for the last 30, 40 years. Larry Summers, you can find him every day. Somebody on Bloomberg's interviewing him, or some academic is retweeting something that Larry Summers said. Larry Summers, forgetting his entire disgusting relationship with the guy, his is a serial policy disaster. From Glass-Steagall to screwing up at Harvard to everything that guy has done this past few decades has been to enrich the people that he's gotten very enriched off of. I mean, Larry's worth tens and tens of millions, if not more. And as is Yellen. And we keep bringing these same people on. In any sort of sane world, no one would ever listen to Larry Summers or Janet Yellen on any issue ever again. They'd be laughed off the stage. Instead, she's some sort of feminist icon. And Larry Summers is like, I don't know, some sort of economic tough guy standing up to Jay Powell or something. Or it's insane that we keep having the same people. On the CARES Act, I mentioned this. One of the congressmen says, "Hey, I just talked to Bob Rubin. I got his advice on the CARES Act." Well, Bob Rubin, seriously? Bob Rubin, who was Gensler's mentor, by the way, is one of the worst financial war criminals that we have, along with Greenspan and the rest of them. And yet, why are we listening to Bob Rubin? And by the way, the CARES Act, as I was tweeting at the time in 2020, was going to be, think of all the theft that went on in 08 and 09, okay? Multiply that by 1,000. That's what you got in March 2020. So it's just insane that we keep these same people in charge. Now, you can default, Ray Dalio, who I make fun of all the time because he's a classic WEF Davos guy, but I do agree with him on some things. He said the other day, you own bonds. He goes, well, you know what? They issued too many bonds and they can't pay it back. So you're either going to get less than your face amount, or you're going to get the full face amount, but the dollars you get paid back with are going to be worth less. And that's just a fact. So inflation is a default. And these guys think they're so much smarter than the guys at the Reichsbank in 1930.
When you listen to Ray Dalio, I hear a guy who tries to sound worldly, who I think is about as shallow as it can be.
Have you seen my thread on Ray Dalio?
No, I'm sure I picked up shreds of it because
oh my God! All I do is post pictures of hot dogs with him quotes from his book Principles. It's the most vapid nonsense you've ever heard.
I'm having another dinner with a guy who you would all know. I have to be careful because I want to say what they said without telling you who they were. I'm happy to tell you too, but I don't want to tell what could be a viral video. I don't know. Could be it'll be buried. But I was talking to this guy.
This is going to get 81 million. This podcast is going to get 81 million views. I guarantee it.
Or 81, one of the two. We start going through the players, and I said Cohodes, and he loved Cohodes. And this guy's Cohodes endorsement was so strong that I told Cohodes, he got the Cohodes, the guy endorsed Cohodes. He said, "Oh yeah, he and I we get along really well."
Good. I agree.
I agree 100%. And rat fuck bastard. That's Cohodes, right? He doesn't pull punches.
I don't want to be on the other side of that. Yeah.
Oh my God, no. He talks about how he'll sit down and some CEO will come over to him and say, "Look, if you ever have a problem with our company, come and talk to me."
Exactly. That's smart.
And Cohodes said, "Well, since you've already offered that, I probably will never have trouble with your company." Right. He's great. He's phenomenal, and he's just so cantankerous, which is great. I got to Dalio, and he said, "I think he's a total fraud."
Right. Yeah.
And that's a vague term. And he says, "I now believe that he actually does own a hedge fund." And I go, "Really?" And he was not joking. He thought Dalio did not have a hedge fund. I hit on Chanos. It wasn't as flattering as I expected. I'll just leave it at that. High standards. Yeah. So
Well, I had a couple of
So
prominent people.
I want to get back to
go ahead.
inflation.
Sure.
Inflation, I totally understand it as a default, but there's very few instances where inflation has defaulted successfully without at the end a real deflationary default, right? It usually ends very bad. Like Weimar Germany, right? They defaulted on their own people, but they didn't default on the sovereign debt, right? They still owed it. And if you look at places like Argentina and stuff, they try to inflate it away, but they end up defaulting. And
they came up with the Rentenmark in 23.
Right.
And that was backed by, I think, by land and by gold, gold and other things. It was a real hard currency, and I think the people were so exhausted by then that it was readily accepted right away. And that was Hjalmar Schacht, who was the Nazi banker, right? So the Nazi guy. But my point, and I make this point a lot on Twitter, is that the hyperinflation had so destroyed German morality in the 20s that it created a fertile soil for Hitler, and all the contemporary accounts agree with that. Now, I get a lot of people saying, no, it was the 30s. It was the 30s. Yeah, but no, the soil was laid out in the 1920s.
It's when douchebag Bernanke says that the depression was caused by the Fed not acting promptly enough. I go, no, dude. The depression was caused by a loose monetary policy for 10 fucking years.
Right.
But my point is that I think the people who are talking about inflation have this utopian vision of a controlled burn.
Sure.
And I don't think I think those are fairy tales. I think
when you control it.
That's right. So I think the attempt to do a controlled burn turns into an inferno.
Because they view inflation and potential hyperinflationary as purely mechanical, where it's literally a lever you're pulling.
It's a dial.
It's half social and half psychological too. They can never predict that psychological tipping point where people are like, all right, we're bailing.
So the question is, are we past the fail-safe point unambiguously?
I think so.
Like, I hope not. But hope is not a strategy. Is that a saying?
I mean,
hope is not a strategy. Yes, that's the right one, actually.
Whether the media wants to admit
ones that are unacceptable.
Whether the media wants to admit it or not, like confidence in institutions is at all-time lows and only going lower, and that's part of that social side of the tipping point.
But here's what I'll tell you. Rudy will confirm this for me, I think. If you lived through the 60s, it felt like all hell was breaking loose. You had black guys getting hosed down and dogs chewing their legs off and shit. You had anti-war protesters. You had kids whose parents were used to Bobby Darin and Annette Funicello trying to raise kids who were dropping acid every day. And the pill had been invented, so free sex was everywhere. So the 60s felt like the end of the world, I think, to adults looking down going, what the fuck is happening? We just lost Kennedy. We lost another Kennedy. We lost Martin Luther King. The one that I would have loved to have seen survived is Malcolm X. I think he could have been a transformational leader. And by the way, Kennedy's description of why his father was not killed by Sirhan is really an eye opener too. He says there's no evidence that his father got killed by Sirhan. None. It's an eye opening podcast that he did. I think that was with Tyson or something. I don't know. But,
I tweeted it out. I sent it out. I'll redo all this as a sidebar to this podcast. I'll retweet all this stuff.
And so you have to understand that I think what we're seeing now, at some level, does not look as bad as the 60s did. Rudy, where do you come in on that?
Well, the media is much worse now.
Oh, the media is awful. The media is awful.
I guess the deep state is, they were very powerful then. Now they have the media in their pocket. So I guess I would say it's marginally worse now, or it is worse now because of that. There's no, the media has always had flaws, but it used to be, and once in a while you still see it. They would speak truth to power. They would go after the government for abuses, and some media still does that. I don't want to bash the entire media, but largely now
you got guys who are doing it. Yes,
right. There are some guys, but largely now the mass media, to me, it goes after individual citizens as an arm of the government. It's basically, the Biden administration, no joke, is is contacting social media saying, I don't like this guy's comments. Can you get him off your social media site? That's a First Amendment. But the thing is, like I've said before, I think half the laws in California are against the Constitution, unconstitutional. But I'm not going to hire a team of lawyers. I can't and go and wait 10 years to get to the Supreme Court to get it overturned. And Gavin Newsom knows that. So he's like, hey, I'll just pass this stupid law.
Biden loses to the Supreme Court on the student debt relief and says he's going to do it anyways.
Yeah, we don't have the rule of law above a certain level.
5 years for the Supreme Court to chime in and say you can't do it now either? What is that all about?
I don't know.
So to me, Biden is treasonous. To me, people who pass laws that are unconstitutional knowingly are treasonous.
Yeah. I don't like to throw that word out because I saw it used a lot. People throw it out like now, where they used to just say, I disagree with you. Now it's like, oh, you're a traitor. I mean, especially coming from the left now. If you're not in favor of the Ukraine war or something, you're a traitor somehow. I don't know. Things like that. But I mean, I saw back in the day, Pedro was calling, Pedro was calling certain people traitors. Yeah. And he followed me since the very beginning. And we'd had a little disagreements over the years. But back then, he went off on, these Republicans that went and visited Putin are traitors. And I said, and then I sent like a picture of like every U.S. president and Hillary Clinton and everybody, all not only visiting Putin, but like grinning and hugging him and shaking hands and smiling. And I'm like, he's a head of state. I don't like MBS, but if you're a U.S. president, you might have to meet with the guy, And so to call people traitors, I mean, only the most rabid nutbags in the 50s would do that. You know what I mean? Like Mitt Romney calling Tulsi Gabbard a traitor because, well, yeah, I don't mean to, I'm just saying I'm careful about that word because I don't like calling people like that. There are some.
The problem is I think I see it now.
Yeah.
So in the olden, 5 years ago, I would have just said they were disagreements. But I now see stuff where it feels like we are being thrown under the bus in a profoundly destructive way. And I just don't know what else to call it besides that at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Biden stuff, it's coming to the surface via the laptop with obvious pay-to-play access and peddling. Could be labeled as treasonous, but it seems to me, the millennial in this group, that they're just trying to loot and rob as much as they can before it completely crumbles. And Rudy, to your point earlier, that history doesn't rhyme, it really repeats itself. If you go back and read Adam Ferguson's When Money Dies, like history is repeating.
We've all read those babies.
Yeah, because and in that book, he really just focuses on the speculative fervor that went on where you have paper boys trading stocks and essentially everybody was a trader back then, obviously with COVID and the TikTok investors and Robinhood and GameStop and all that stuff like that has returned. And you see it in crypto as well. But then there's other, I don't think he really touched on it in this book, but there's other threads that have been put out there on Twitter that really highlight the cultural degeneracy that was rampant in Weimar, like leading up to it. Like people were really obsessed with sex and gender, trans issues were big issues in Weimar back then. Yeah. And that's why it's using this, obviously on the mechanic side of things, like Fed's monetary base has expanded by an insane amount. We just printed $1 trillion worth of debt in a month, and we're probably going to have to turn the money printers back on. But once you add up the mechanical side of things, where the monetary base is with the social stuff, that's why I'm pretty convinced we're in the process right now.
Well, the debt ceiling was kind of funny because we talk about, the U.S. has never defaulted on its debt. And I'm laughing at, you guys know this, we defaulted in 1933. We defaulted in 1968 off of silver. We defaulted in 1971. And to your earlier point, or someone's earlier point, I see so many charts that just go off the rails starting around the late 60s, early 70s when we went off real money. Now there's no anchor. There's no brakes. And I think we've financialized everything now. I mean, look at the number of homes that are owned by Blackstone. That's all post 2010.
The great risk is that the metaphor I like is when the torpedo bounces across the airfield in Pearl Harbor and Red sticks his head up and says, hey guys, it's a dud. then he gets his ass blown off, right? Because it wasn't a dud. The great risk is that because the system is letting us continue to do it, organic chemistry is a perfect analogy. Reactions give off heat when they go, most often. And the heat also makes them go faster. And so what a bomb is a reaction. It just goes faster and faster and faster, all in a fraction of a second. And the problem is if you start adding all these reagents at low temperature where the heat's not yet being given off, and then you get this big fucking vat full of shit, it's a bomb, and you don't know how to disarm it, because once it starts warming, and then it starts going faster, and then it starts warming, and then you're off to the races. And so by the world letting us flood the market with U.S. money, Triffin's dilemma has been sort of pushed back. But it's left us with this bomb that no bomb squad can disarm.
Oh yeah, I mean, that's what I feel. It feels like we're in a lull period, like anchoring to like 2008 and what happened that year when WAMU blew up. And then the spring and the summer was relatively calm. Then everything happened in the fall. It feels like we're lining up for that pretty perfectly right now in 2023 as well.
And Rudy and with Grant mentioned Tanta. Tanta was telling us unbelievable treasures of nuggets. And I didn't know who she was at the time until she died. She died of cancer. And I pointed out to a person who wrote an important sort of article about her death. As I said, if you look at the table, there's a pack of cigarettes on the table in front of her. But remember, Rudy, you remember Tanta telling us in blog after blog, I think it was Seeking Alpha or something.
No, it's calculated risk.
Calculated risk. And she was telling us the chaos underneath the surface. Right. Meanwhile, and I don't know who was pointing this out, the market ABX index, which is the derivatives index, had started quietly tanking.
Right.
And it was at par, and then all of a sudden it just starts going down, and no news agency's talking about it. And it's just tanking, and these derivatives are going to shit. And Tanta might have been pointing, I can't remember the details, but you could just tell there was this like ticking time bomb under the surface. And, the market blew up in 06, right? The real estate market was gone in 06.
It peaked. If you look at Case Shiller, it peaked nationally in 06, early
right.
06.
And yet, one of my favorite stories is I told my class in probably February or March of 07, which if you remember, it hadn't blown up yet. There were tiny little now audible warning signs that the things were going to shit, but it was real early. And I was lecturing, and I turned to my class, and I literally said, without warning, I said, in one of my interruptions, I'm told now, I think the banking system's about to collapse. And they all looked at me like totally stunned. And I said, no, I'm not kidding. I even think I said something to the effect that you won't be able to get money out of your ATM machine, which became a trite phrase eventually. And so what happened is I had this same group in an advanced, an honors thesis course 2 years later. That was February of 09. And the first day of class, I said, did I tell you the banks were going to collapse? Because that's when it was just a complete utter shitstorm. And they said, yes, you did. And I said, did any of your econ professors tell you that? And they said, no. And I said, what are those assholes paid for? That was one of my first lecture statements to them. My first guest lecture was the former CEO of Morgan Stanley Bank, the banking subsidiary of Morgan Stanley. And he gave first of all, I had dinner with him. And I mentioned the Austrians. And he didn't know what I was talking about. And I'm thinking he thinks I'm talking about guys from Austria at this point, right? And then he gave a lecture to my class. It lasted about 2 hours. The most amazing compliment I ever got is he stood up there and he said, I'm sitting at dinner with Dave, and there's another guy there. And he says, within 15 minutes, I realized I am not the smartest guy at this table. I go, that's pretty good. So he pulled out, remember that trite plot of the highly colorful subprime mortgages put out, I think it was by Credit Suisse or something?
The reset chart?
The reset chart.
Yeah, that was great. Yeah.
Months from now, and they said, oh, no, fuck, that's a stupid way to do it. And they revised it to put dates on it. And he pulled, that was the one chart he brought to show the kids. And that was the most posted chart in all of the history of financial Twitter, right? I mean, or whatever it was. Twitter was a lie. But, and so you could see it coming. But it took, what, a year and a half?
I'm always early / wrong. I was walking around the house probably in 2005 going, or 6 going, this is insane. It's going to, remember how bad the .com bubble is? This is worse. And it was worse. And now, your caldera that you can see only from space of this bubble is bigger than everything. And the numbers are so much bigger.
I'd forgotten about that quote. You started to say it and I go, oh, fuck, right. That was a good one.
It's the everything bubble in everything. And when you're right, when you have...
Who gets credit for everything bubble? I give it to Felder. Is he the one who gets credit?
Oh, I don't know on that one. I mean, I think sometimes some of these phrases can appear spontaneously in multiple places at the same time just because it's so obvious. But I don't know who did that. Maybe there was someone who did it first. I was reading Calculator Risk, which Tonta was way ahead of the game then. I think I was looking like at the forums Burry was in, but I never replied. I just wasn't sophisticated enough clearly to take advantage of any of that ABX stuff. I had 2 shorts in 08. Oh, there we go. Markets closed 2809. IndyMac and Downey Savings. And so, of course, I covered those 2 soon. But my big problem in 0809 was I wasn't bearish enough. You know what I mean?
Here's the problem. Let me defend you.
Yeah.
And I'm going to argue I was sophisticated enough to not short. And that is, I was watching this going, when this goes, there's going to be no one to pay me.
That's true.
And so if you could buy all the derivatives you want. The guys who got famous for making a fuck ton of money in 09, they got bailed out. They wouldn't have been paid if they hadn't been bailed out. So the counterparty risk was the operative word. I'm going, I don't want to be near that system at all when it goes out.
That's true. Like I was joking today, who's the counterparty on U.S. government credit default swaps, right? I mean, Credit Suisse or something. Yeah, that's like insane.
And I remember when the CEO of Citigroup said, "Don't worry, we're hedged." I go, by fucking who? The Klingon Empire?
Yep.
Who that's why, by the way, I'm critical of people who are critical of Silicon Valley Bank. Now, I know they fuck stuff up. But if you had told me 5 years ago, oh, yeah, these guys are going to totally destroy their bank by buying treasuries, I would have said, what kind of nutty world is this?
Yeah, but they also were badly managed, too, I think.
They were. But you shouldn't.
But that all goes back to ZERP. I mean, that's the original sin. People are like, oh, rates are up to 5% now. Well, that's historically normal. I mean, the policy mistake was the idiocy of these economists that we had ZERP and QE for a dozen plus years. That affects the price, as you mentioned, of every single thing on Earth. And so a lot of stupid things happen under ZERP. And now we're back to a more normal environment, except we've added trillions and trillions and trillions of non-productive debt. Well, gee, who encouraged non-productive debt every day for the last, most of the last 20 years? The U.S. government and the Fed. And so,
and corporations.
Well, yeah, but they're smart. Like there's a great anecdote in Chris Leonard's book, The Lords of Easy Money, where he talks about Dick Fisher is talking at one of these meetings to Bernanke back in the day, and he says, hey, I just talked to the head of Texas Instruments, and he told me that zero rates, he's not going to add a single job. He's going to take all that money and he's going to do share buybacks. He's not going to invest it in plant and equipment. And Bernanke, being the total, I don't cuss on air, but the total of what you think he is, he said, thank you, Mr. Fisher, for bringing this to our attention, but we do not want to bring outside people into this discussion where they are not trained economists, something to that effect. And Greenspan said the exact same thing in like 05 in the minutes. He says, we do not, on the housing bubble, he says, something like, we do not want to let other people who involved in the conversation about a housing bubble who are not as informed as we are. Exactly. And so these guys are clowns. There's nobody more clueless than an academic economist I found over the years. They have zero self-awareness. There's no accountability. None of them are elected. Then they get rewarded at Citadel and PIMCO. I mean, Bernanke should be, on a desert island eating scorpions, in my opinion. But somehow he wins a Sveriges Prize, Nobel Prize. It's a joke. We got to get rid of these clowns. We got to get rid of the same clowns that we've had for the last 20, 30 years. And that includes politicians, and that includes economists and everybody else. So anyway, do you want to have some final thoughts, Marty, or we're going to go on here for 15 hours?
We could go for as long as you gentlemen would like to. I just wanted to make it known you just made the case for Bitcoin without knowing it. So
let me ask you though, are you really comfortable? Because I'm reading CBDC articles saying they're just going to swallow the whole fucking wad of shit. Are you confident that that's not true? That that's just blarney?
I mean, they're definitely going to try the CBDC, but it's going to be such a terrible product from a freedom perspective.
I'm argue that the whole thing's going to be pulled under one big thing called FAST, FASTT.
I haven't read that.
They're going to try to swallow the whole fucking thing up.
They're going to try to, but I don't think they're going to be successful. I read the Bank for International Settlements blueprint for the future monetary system of the world, which is CBDC. What they're trying to do, just from like a technical perspective, understanding the software of it, like it's not going to work. It's too complex. It's too complicated. And again, the user experience is going to be terrible. The first time somebody goes to a store and they say, hey, you can't buy meat because you've used up too many carbon credits this month. They're going to look for an alternative.
That's the horror story, though.
Yeah.
That is the horror story.
They can't stop Bitcoin. It's my opinion that it's going to be very hard to stop Bitcoin. I think the cat's already out of the bag. And
now, is there any way that Bitcoin could lose to another crypto?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so.
Where are you on crypto, Rudy? I've never actually noticed.
I'm my usual answer is I got nothing against it. I'm not really a crypto guy. I never got into it. I was telling Marty I could be a billionaire because I could have bought it all day. My line of thinking was more like yours. Of course, we're both Luddites. Is I always thought, even years ago, that if it ever became a threat to the U.S. dollar, I mean, I had people telling me it's going to be the world reserve currency and all that. I'm just looking at them like, if this thing is ever a real threat to the U.S. dollar, they will crush it like a bug. And I know people like say, well, they can't crush it because, but they can sentence you to 20 years in jail in the U.S. if you're caught using it in any way, shape, or form. And the surveillance state now is they know everything you're doing. And they can track Bitcoin too.
Unbelievably, right? So watching the J6 and shit tells you that they're not afraid to just come in full Stalin mode.
Yeah, buy a Faraday bag. Yeah.
As Marty knows, I've been hanging off the precipice. I've never shit on the hodlers. At times, I'll shit on the naive hodlers. Right? You got your share of whack jobs, not like equity buyers don't. But the hodlers community is the youngest investment community probably in the history of investing. But revolutions are not fueled by old men. And so,
are you talking about Larry Fink? I mean, now he's in Bitcoin and he's back. I've defended Bitcoin and I distinguish Bitcoin from crypto, where crypto is with their 20,000 coins is a joke. The NFT thing, I never bought into that crap, but I can understand Bitcoin. I've never argued against it. I certainly am not opposed to making it illegal or anything like that. But also it was like I wasn't really paying much attention to it, and then I noticed that look who's attacking it. Lagarde, Augustin Carstens. I mean, all the usual suspects of psychopaths that run this world. And I go, okay, it must be something to it if these guys really hate it. But then now I'm kind of thrown for a loop because now Larry Fink's going to come in and, so I don't know what to make of it. I got nothing against it. I actually own a very small amount. So maybe I hope it goes to 800 billion or something. And then, I'll be okay. And I don't, and the one thing I will say about it is I've met a lot of people who, young Bitcoin people who, so at first they kind of try and pound me like, dude, you got to get into Bitcoin. But after a while, I think they figure out that I'm not their enemy and I'm actually on their side on a lot of things, common ground again. There's a lot of overlap. And if anything, I'm very happy that a lot of these young people through Bitcoin have become educated about our financial system and about what the Fed does and the history of monetary policy. And I think that's fantastic. And I don't care whether they own Bitcoin or gold or IBM shares. I mean, I'm glad that they're learning history because I think beyond the money aspect of it, the Bitcoin aspect of it, this will help affect their decisions when they vote for somebody, say, or when they, make decisions. They tend to side with the people who aren't the ones that want to control your life from the top down. And
Bitcoin serves a similar function that the MMT wackadoodles, those guys are whacked, served, was that despite their completely cockeyed thinking about how to run a government by just printing money, they did the best job of articulating how the banking system works. Mm-hmm. The MMT guys did a good job sort of foundational level saying this is how the banking system works. So that's great, but your model includes no provisions for handling inflation.
Right.
And you're going
to you just tax it out of circulation.
Yeah. I kind of have to get going in a bit. I just, if you don't mind, I'd just leave a little or end with a little comment here, and that, like you were saying, it's kind of a, we get into a lot of dark topics on this or unpleasant topics, but I think people should, instead of doing top down like the Augustine Carstens of the world want to do bottom up, concentrate on your life, on your family, on your friends, on your community. Vote local, get some, like whoever I vote for president, it's not going to matter at all. Zero. I have no influence on that. But I can, Whitney's awesome. Recommend her for anything she writes. But you vote local elections, get some bottom up, vote for city council, vote for your state senator, and hopefully we can, I think I'm doing a little use, and Dave and Marty, in educating people and discuss and getting people to think about things they never thought about before. And I hopefully try and do it in an entertaining way. So I just want to leave people, instead of thinking like, oh, the world's going to collapse. Well, the world only ends once. So, let's try and bottoms up, help your local community. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. So.
Completely agree.
My 2 cents is learn to live small footprint and save. Find a way.
Thank you, by the way, you two. I have to get going, but I really appreciate this. And of course, I could talk for another 8 hours. So, I'm like Dave, I could go on or keep going, but I do, we could do this again another time.
Yeah, you should definitely do it again.
Pop off. We'll bad talk you some.
That's fine. That's fine. I expect nothing less. But anyway, I appreciate it, guys. And thank you. And nice to meet both of you.
Thank you, Rudy. It was a pleasure.
All right. Take care.
Marty, was our 5th podcast, maybe? It's got to be. Yeah, it's way up there.
I will say, Bitcoin is grassroots. It is emergent. And that's you said the word that many people don't like to say within Bitcoin, but it's true. It is a revolution. I do think it is the millennials' redemption arc, where I think if you talk to people in the space that are actually working and building on it, we're willing to die on this hill. We're taking the power.
Battle of the bastards, right? It's going to be the battle of the bastards.
Yeah.
And, I could end up buying Bitcoin sooner, secondarily, actually, because I have a decent infatuation with the guys at Horizon Kinetics, and Stahl, the head of the operation, who's got a good head on his shoulders, is a super hodler, and I could imagine saying, okay, fuck it, Murray, just take my money, invest it in the various ways that you do, which will include Bitcoin. Awesome. I just, and if I ever do decide to buy it, I'm just going to contact you. And you said you'd walk me through buying Bitcoin, so at some point, I'm just, me, I'm waiting for some moment where it's going to be a click. I'm going to go, this is the team that's going to win. And that when that click occurs, then I'm going to go. People always want me to buy just a little bit. I go, a little bit won't change my life. I don't need a little bit, right? You got to either do balls to the wall, because you're talking about your savings, right?
Well, we're less than a year out from the next Bitcoin subsidy halving, so it's only going to get much scarcer in April of next year.
Yeah, I know. Fascinating problems. Great to have Rudy on, huh?
It's great to have Rudy on. Thank you for putting that together. I mean, I was just happy to be a little fly on this.
So thank Rudy for that. Rudy just reached out to me and said, let's do a podcast. Who do you want? So we'll see if we can get this one totally viral. And I gave him 3 names. I don't think I'm going to tell the other 2 how close they were to getting whatever the hell this thing ends up being.
Well, I'm honored that I was one of the 3 names and that I was chosen.
You're number 1. You got it. And you're a millennial, so that's quite a feat.
We get a bad rap, I'm telling you.
You do get a bad rap. You do. It's a pejor. It's like conspiracy theorists, right? It's the same sort of idea. Oh, millennial. Oh, it must be a douchebag. It's like, no, he was born 40 years ago. That's all it means.
I did not quite yet. 32. All right, we're there.
Okay.
We've got 8 more years till I hit.
Now, right? You have 2 kids now. How old are they?
3 and 1.
Oh boy, tell me 2 wasn't spectacular. 2 wasn't.
2 was fine. 3's been worse. 2 was bad.
I love 2.
Better.
I thought 2 was phenomenal because the shit coming out of their mouth, you go, holy fuck, that's what you've been thinking? You know,
Yeah.
and I just bought a Boston Terrier yesterday, so I'm up to 3 now. So the famous Charlie has competition. This one's a sweetheart of a dog.
She's very cute.
She's pretty. She's remarkably. But Charlie became a legend on Pomp's podcast when I must have said fucking Charlie at least 8 times during the he wouldn't let me finish the podcast.
He became a legend on this one too because he snored for about an hour and a half on the last.
Oh, and I didn't. Then I finally heard it. I go, oh, like shit. He was really sawing wood. I know. And then there was the podcast we did where I didn't know it, but I was in the dark.
Oh yeah, the sun went down behind you.
The sun went down, and I'm sitting there looking at a bright screen, and at the end you go, by the way, you're in the pitch black for the last hour and a half. And
it's never boring.
You know, drinking piss during a podcast, doing my Gandhi imitation. You know, there's all sorts of shit.
Yeah, I'm as optimistic as ever. Things are dire. A lot of the shit we talked about is dire, but again, via Bitcoin and other grassroots movements, like the opportunity to fight back against these bastards has never been easier.
There's a thing called hyper-normalization where I'm trying to remember the guy's name who coined it, who's written books on it. And it's where you know that everything's really, really, really bleak, like a Ruski during the Soviet era. And yet you can see absolutely no way out. And that's what he calls hypernormalization. So you ask a Ruski back in, the 70s, they go, I have nothing to look forward to, right? And I think the U.S. is hypernormalizing. And as you said, the hodlers see a way out. But a lot of people don't see a way out. I keep thinking of the lyrics of the song Eleanor Rigby. Look at all the lonely people, right? Something about post-COVID for me, I see people and I go, they kind of look like they're just kind of going through the motions. And it could be in my head, right? Maybe they're happy as clams, but I see people and it just, everything seems broken, right? The medical system is a disaster now because they took a system that was under pressure from aging boomers getting old. They locked it down so that it produced a huge backlog, and then they made them vaccines, which produced a huge attrition. And so now we have a medical system where, you want something done, it takes 6 months. And truckers, they can't find truckers. And somehow it seems like a controlled demolition to me, right? It doesn't seem. If you wanted to destroy the United States because you were a globalist and we were in the way, they've done an excellent job.
Yeah, I completely agree. And going back to your anecdote about the questionnaire responses from your students this semester, like I wonder if there's something psychologically, again, in the inflation data or them just feeling it in their everyday lives or being more aware of it, where
I think because I'm openly right-wing, I think that causes trouble. I also, as you know, got canceled a couple of years ago. So if you Google my name, you Google, war criminal of all time, you see Stalin, Collum, Gaddafi, and so, I was voted class clown. I students used to love the lectures because I would tell these funny ass stories. And now they don't seem to appreciate them. One day I gave a guest lecture and I noticed that I was arguing that the things I was telling them I didn't believe. So guest lectures, you're just burning the clock. but I was arguing, I'd show some mechanism of a reaction, and I say, but I this is probably not true for the following reason. No one studied it, blah, blah, blah. And in the middle, I said, you notice I'm constantly denouncing because everything we've ever studied turned out to be wrong when we finally dug in and looked at it. And then I said, matter-of-factly, just parenthetically, I said, you know those Vegas shootings? I said, there's something wrong with those. I'm digging into it. And I didn't say anything else. I said, there's something wrong with that story. Now there's a whole documentary. I wrote about it. Anyone who's looked into it says, holy shit, they're wrong from head to toe. I ended up in the chair's office on that one.
Really?
I just said, there's something wrong with the Vegas shootings. I'm going to dig into it. I ended up in the chair's office. To deal with a complaint, any complaint. I had a more recent one where I retweeted an Eddie Dowd tweet. I retweeted an Eddie Dowd tweet. It turns out it takes 6 signatures to put the thing to rest. So the chair, who's a very good friend of mine, he was my former associate chair when I was department chair. He walks in my office and he says, I said, what's up? You don't come here when there's not a problem. He says, yeah, the such and such a tweet. I go, you got to be kidding me. And he needed an answer out of me to finish the whole, wrap this whole, cluster fuck up and put it to rest. And he said, what can I say? And I said, well, tell them to go fuck themselves up the ass sideways. Well, I'm kind of looking for something a little better than that. And I said, okay, let's recouch that, right? I am ready to do battle. I don't think they're going to come at me again because I think they've decided I can't be touched because they've tried a few times. But I'm ready to do battle. They come at me again, I'm going open warfare. First, I'll talk to Cornell and say, look, how do you want to handle this? I'll give them a chance because I don't want to go to war, cause Cornell trouble when they don't need it, right? But when I got canceled, they threw me under the bus a little bit. The president of the university threw me under the bus a little bit. And it stopped it. But I'm going, they said that my values weren't those of Cornell. And then I actually wrote about what I actually tweeted about. And at the end, I pointed out the guy was a total grifter and that I was dead fucking right. And then I said, are you sure my values don't represent your values? But Cornell was just trying to get it right. They're just trying to make shit not blow up in their face. They don't need a big fucking national story about it, what a bunch of heads are. So I'd first approach Cornell and say, look, these guys are coming at me. If you shut your mouth, I shut my mouth, it'll just go away. If you want to make a big deal, I'll go to war. Give me the call. And I think they won't. I think they're pretty good. I know Cornell Legal. I beat 2 labor union movements working with Cornell Legal to do it. They know they owe me. So I think Cornell's a good administration, actually. I think universities are not as bad as people think. But if you're a parent and you got a kid heading off to college, look over their shoulder and ask them, what are they studying in? Because you go to Cornell and you take a fucking 4 credit hour course on fucking gender. You just spent $10,000 to listen to some fucking bulldyke talk about some bullshit topic. By the way, that seems scary, right? That's a kind of an inflammatory statement. I'm 68 fucking years old. By the time they get me, I'm going to be 70. And so I don't give a fuck. These idiots who are teaching this crap, someone's got to call them out. I'll get Matt Walsh to come to campus and give them hell.
Yeah. No, and it goes back to Rudy's point, too. Like, we really need to bring back strong nuclear families where the parents are very involved.
There's the horror story, the fucking horror story. There's like middle schools with like 70 transfers in one school. That is not biology. That is not dysmorphia. That is a social movement, right? But here's the fucking problem. You got parents who are signing off on it because they're fucking stupid. Instead, what they should be doing is say, okay, Bob, or Bobette, or whatever you want to be called, let's talk about this a little bit. And by the way, no, you're not going to get hormone injections because, I'm not going to let you get a tattoo on your fucking forehead. And if when you're 18 and you still want to do it, I'll back you, right? But and we're going to end up with a whole generation with a ton of fucking kids who totally fucked themselves up, and they're going to be saying to their parents, "Where were you when I needed you?
Mm-hmm.
Why did you not stop me from chemically castrating myself? Where were the parents to say, well, you know, it may sound like a good idea now, but it's not. It's a bad idea.
Well, it goes back to your point on hypernormalization. Like, I think a lot of that's driven by worry about what their peers think about them not being accepting.
Right. But I saw this amazing video by a 10-year veteran of transgender, and it was a current dude. And he was very convincing, right? He looked like a dude. He had a beard. He sounded good. He was kind of handsome, you know, no problem whatsoever. And he was kind of weepy-eyed, talking about how bad it is. And his point was not that he made a mistake. He said it was a lonely existence. And of course, your first reflex is, well, dude, you're a transgender. And so it's not going to be easy to make friends because that's just not normal. That's not going to go well down at the Moose Club and whatever, you know. And so why are you surprised? But that was not his point either. His point was that living the life of a man is lonely by the standards of a woman. So he's saying, I walk down the street and people walk around me to avoid me and things like that. And he says, he thought that living the life of a man was going to be some utopian thing. You hurt your fucking self. They don't say, oh, you know, let me help you. They go, no, suck it up, buttercup. What are you, some kind of pussy? And we have to suck shit up. It's just what we're called to do. And this transgender didn't know that's what he would experience when he became a dude. And it was a moving speech. It was actually rather compelling. He just said, I just didn't know how lonely it was being a dude.
Yeah, no, I saw that as well.
Wasn't that well done?
Yeah.
But did you take a while to understand what his point was going to be? At first, you're thinking, well, you know, no one likes me because I'm kind of crazy. You know, no, that was not his point at all. His point was being a guy has its downside.
Yeah, like I would not have been able to tell that dude transition from a woman.
Oh no, not at all. No, that was a highly successful transition. That was, you know, they're bitching about putting, you know, transgender women into beauty pageants. I go, I don't have a problem with that, as long as you don't just give them the fucking win out of some social reason. If some dude can win on the looks category, God damn, that guy should get some sort of medal, right? I mean, that's amazing. You've seen transgenders you'd tap in a heartbeat, right? I mean, you might decide at the last minute when you find out what you were doing, but you don't want to be putting big fat transgenders who are ugly into beauty pageants and giving them the gold medal.
Yeah,
that's just stupid.
Yeah, it is crazy how it's like a social contagion, particularly at like the lower levels of education.
Contagion. And by the way, this my obsession over pedophilia is a non-trivial topic. So the Sound of Freedom and all that shit is kind of blowing up. You dig into the Sound of Freedom, it's a little ambiguous what that movie's about.
It's a limited hangout.
Well, it's so first, what it looks like is just a great feel-good story about a guy doing the right thing. And you're going, why is the media beating the shit out of it? Well, I don't know, except for the fact that my one obvious conclusion is that it's embarrassing to people who are in positions of power who get blowjobs from 5-year-olds, right? And I think, here's my suspicion, I think there's a ton of them. I think it's everywhere.
Oh.
And I actually think I have this working hypothesis. I have two curious sort of phrases I use. One is we fictionalize reality. So what do? Reality is MK Ultra. Fictionalized reality is Born Identity. So by making the Born Identity, which I think is spot on MK Ultra, you make people think of the MK Ultra story as fiction. So you front run. And so you look at all these movies, you go, holy shit, they all look like the reality that we're trying to uncover. And people say, that's just the Born Identity, so that it's dismissible. In this book, The Franklin Scandal, they don't hit it hard, but there's crackheads, former abused children, guys who corroborate with each other that they watched adult men having sex with 5-year-olds and choking them to death. Real satanic crap. Now, Sound of Freedom, one of the problems with it, there were two problems. One is my wife picked up right away. He went in, did you see the movie?
No, not yet.
He went in to save like 50 kids, and he comes out with them. And it's a real feel-good thing. But the girl he was inspired to go get wasn't in the group. And so he went deep into the Columbia jungle, risking 95% chance of dying from these Colombian drug lords, and gets the girl. And suppose it's a true story. He had 7 kids at home. My wife shit a brick right away and said, you should never leave 7 kids at home to do something like that. That's not responsible at all. Mm-hmm. And I'm going, that's right. Then the second thing is the movie maybe judiciously showed the pervs as pervs. The creepy looking guy with the van, they in no way implied that senators and congressmen are buying these kids, which I think they are. You start Googling, should I mention it in my doctor Zoom group? And I said, I'm on this theme. And what it gets me is an explanation for why people do completely and utterly irrational things that it's just unexplainable. Why did Prince Andrew do an interview? Because someone told him he had to. Mm-hmm. Right? And he didn't blow it. He was told to go into the jaws of death there. You got to do it now, Prince. And so I think they don't corrupt powerful people. They corrupt them before they give them power. Mm-hmm. So if you can't be corrupted, you don't get the gig. And I think Hollywood's particularly bad. I think in Hollywood, it's like I think they probably say, here's a 5-year-old, you're going to get a blowjob, we're going to film you, or you're not getting a good part. You want this part? You got to do it. I think it's that bad. So then I'm watching Corey Feldman. You ever seen that tape where he's on The View? Mm-hmm. And pedophilia is rampant in Hollywood? And who attacked him? I won't
name names.
But who attacked him? So the appropriate thing to do then is say, oh, that's really awful. Let's go to commercial. What the fuck are you doing, right? That's what you would do. But that's not what she did. Barbara Walters attacked him. And I'm going, why is Barbara Walters attacking a guy who says there's a pedophilia problem in Hollywood? That's one of those, holy fuck, we should look into it, right? Yeah. But that's not what she did. Then I'm reading one of my books, and they point out that Barbara Walters was tight as tight could be. They used to joke about them being married. They were so tight with Roy Cohn. And I go, boy, that plot just thickened. So I'm on this Dr. Zoom group, and I mention I'm going down this dark path. And there's a chat board, and all of a sudden links start popping up. My Dr. Zoom group with very elite doctors from all over the world start poking up links, and I'm like copying and pasting them as fast as I can. I'm going through them, and there's so much bizarre shit out there. And one of the theories out there is that this movie's just a front. It's a psyop.
It's a limited hangout. I mean, when you look into like the people that funded it and that the original DHS guy are connected, the movie's based off of.
Funders are creepy fucks.
Yeah.
Rich creepy fucks, the guys who funded it. And so then I start getting links to like the National Center for Missing and Abused Children, right? And within no time at all, you become convinced based on all their connections, they're just a Clinton Foundation lookalike. Mm-hmm. They're just a laundering scheme. And the laundering being, let's get huge fucking money out of governments to find missing children and forget about the fact that we never, ever bring one home. And then you find documentaries of, 50 fucking powerful people who got caught, and they show you what the punishments were, and they were nothing. One chick got caught trafficking 33 fucking kids in Haiti. Where she worked at, she calls in the Clintons and gets them off. Gets herself off.
You working for like the Amber Alert system or something like that
working for the Amber Alert system, yes. Holy moly, what a funny story that is, right? And so you start finding all these stories and you go, holy shit, the whole thing is just a scam. And that gets back, Rudy wants to look at the bright side. And Rudy is very upbeat in his very dark way. And I'm looking at this shit going, God, it seems like we should just scrub the planet of humanity and just start over. Find something. Let the apes give it a shot. Let's do Planet of the Apes.
I mean, you're talking to somebody who went down a pretty deep Pizzagate rabbit hole back in the day. And
well, where do you stand on Pizzagate? Because I'm pretty convinced that Pizzagate has reality to it. I just don't know which part of it we got duped on. I think Pizzagate and the Hamlin story in many ways are similar. They threw out bogeys to bait people into taking the wrong path.
Agree. It's similar to QAnon. I mean, the emails that WikiLeaks found, I mean, particularly between Hillary and John Podesta are like very...
Yeah, let's have $60,000 budget for pizza and, and the symbol for pedophilia, that triangle thing, it's everywhere. Yeah. You see the 33? You see the 33 crap?
Mm-hmm.
33 where the number, and they're going, we have 33 new cases of COVID in Santa Monica County, right? Oh, we have 33 new cases of COVID in the state of Montana. Oh, we got 33 new cases. 33 is everywhere. And you go, what? And then I'm watching McCarthy get his standing ovation for finally on 12 fucking votes later or something, becoming Speaker of the House. And there's a guy sitting behind him and you can't see his head. And the guy sitting behind him and he has his hands on the table and he does that. And then pulls his hands away. And then you can watch another one where it was Mitch McConnell and he's talking and he's saying something and he looks around behind him and there's some guy who'd put his hands on the table and did that right behind him. And then took his hands out. McConnell looks over his shoulder. What the fuck's that? So I think these guys are dark motherfuckers. And I think the problem is, and spirit cooking. It's not fake. The only thing I don't know is whether they eat real people. Right?
They don't take pictures of the real people that they share.
Well, that's right. That's right. But if you had to bet a paycheck, would you bet they eat real people or not?
Yeah, I'd bet too.
And the Hollywood elite is all over the spirit cooking story. Oh, and that's what the guy asked me. He said, I want to ask you about Damar Hamlin and Chris Rock getting slapped. And I said, those are two fascinatingly related stories, right? Those are two stories that seem to have nothing to do with the bad darkness, but then the Damar Hamlin looks like was designed to make us fall for a trap, right? He really didn't show his face for a long time, and he really hid his face for a long time, and you're going, no, this guy's not alive. There's something going on here. And then he shows up and you go, I feel like such an idiot.
Same with Jamie Foxx this last week or two.
Jamie Foxx. Chris Rock, though, knew he was going to get slapped. Why hasn't he stepped out and said, hey, Will Smith and I, we set that up. That was all for just fun. He let Will Smith hang out there. Did he have to do it, right? Chris Rock knew he was about to take one in the chops. You can see it, lean into it, grimace into it, hands behind his back, right? Everything about it. Someone broke down the slap and it's like, yeah, he knew it was coming. And I figured any day he's going to say, oh yeah, we just set it up. And even if it wasn't set up, they were friends, you'd say Chris would have, and then say, look, he set it up. You say, well, you douchebag, but I'm going to save you on this one. That's what you do. What is all that weird shit? I don't know.
It's all weird. I've gone deep down these rabbit holes. And again, that's why I focus on Bitcoin. I don't think there's anything we can do through the system as it stands today to fix these problems. But yeah, I mean,
you understood it would help, and that's clearly not the case now.
No, but like I've gone into this with Whitney too in a couple episodes. But if you go into like the founding of the FBI and CIA, like there was a satanic, there was open Satanists, and it's all one big humiliation ritual. Where like you're mentioning,
I'll tell you what rattled my ass when Whitney was doing a podcast with who's that rough and tough? He looks Arab to me. PDB or something.
Pat David Bettman or whatever.
Yeah, and she burst into tears. And I don't know anyone tougher than Whitney Webb, right? And she burst into tears, and it's clear she was just out of gas on these incredibly dark topics.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
And,
bad. I mean, if you go into the history of Hollywood too, particularly in the 70s, there was like a very open satanic group that sort of spread their
I'm still
tentacles.
trying to dig through this just to tell a story so people know that it's there.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
It doesn't have to change anything. I just want people, when I wrote about the Vegas shoot, I don't think you could read it without going, holy shit, there is something fucked up there.
yeah, I mean, there's one good theory that was one big satanic sort of occult ritual.
The other theory is that the Saudis tried to take out Solomon. I did a couple of podcasts with John Collum, and his theories are interesting, but he seems to sort of selectively take the stuff that he makes sense to him and not worry about the stuff that doesn't. And,
the Saudi theory is what they were in a bunch of Black Hawk helicopters mowing people down.
Yeah, but there was too much weird shit at the ground level, so it couldn't just be the Black Hawks. It just couldn't be that. But who was I talking to? I was talking to someone the other day, and I said 9/11. Do you know anyone who believes 9/11 was legitimately Arabs?
No, not anymore.
I've never shown anyone Building 7 collapse, and worse than Building 7, I think, is the lack of footage of the Pentagon.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Building 7, theoretically, I can imagine somehow, some way, the building got damaged. But there's no way you can sneak a jumbo jet into Washington, D.C. with more cameras per square inch than any city in the country with 45 minutes notice and not get footage of the Pentagon getting whacked.
Yeah.
And there's none, right? There's none.
No.
So you go, well,
back to the pedo stuff too. Like there's like instances like Dennis Hastert, Speaker of the House. He
got caught, or he somehow, something happened, and every once in a while, Epstein had to take one. Ghislaine had to do something. Ghislaine won't be in jail for 20 years.
Andrew Breitbart tweeting about John Podesta and then dying of a heart attack not too long after.
Oh, by the way, in the Franklin scandal, the bulldog investigator into the pedophile ring, turns out his plane blew up. Yep. The scary thing about the Franklin scandal is that it was a penny ante looking pedophile ring that drew huge cover-up from very high places. You're going, why are they responding at that level to that?
Yeah, something stinks. And again, during COVID, when all that stuff was going down, I fell down some deep rabbit holes. I've since come out.
But you don't come out because you realize you made a mistake. You came out because it's not worth any more effort.
Yeah, exactly. It's too many sleepless nights, too much.
Well, those are very dark, right? I used to love writing about stupid things like night trading blowing up in 45 minutes and things like that. Those are just, those are rib tickling funny. But and even, Corzine getting off. Who wrote the book, by the way, that looked at the legal side of the 08-09 crisis? Prominent author wrote a book about the legal battles behind the scene that was a very good book. I can't remember the author. It was some journalist who wrote a book about it. And I can find it if I ever have to, but I don't have Rudy's recall. But someone wrote a book about it, and they explained how the prosecutors really did try to go at the guys, and they labored to piece together an airtight case to put some fucking guy in prison to hope the house of cards starts to fall. And then an appeals court would spend 3 hours and overturn it. They said 3 fucking hours. You guys looked at the data for 3 fucking hours. It's like the OJ acquittal, right?
Yeah, it's all a big scam. All around. And it does if you dive deep down the rabbit holes and you stay down there, it can become all incumbents.
You have to come up for air. You have to come up for air.
Yeah. No, but I do think the evidence is quite clear that elite pedophile rings exist. Mm-hmm. No one
even denies that there's a couple of million kids a year missing. And I love the guys who love who are all self-assured, buying their electric cars, ignoring the fact that 75% of the cobalt is being mined by child slave labor. And they it's like, how do you sleep at night buying that fucking Tesla, knowing that slave labor and open pit mines, children with hammers mining cobalt for your
the car's so quiet it just lulls you to sleep. It's pretty easy. You don't have a large engine.
And I just saw Biden guys want to shut down basically almost all of the gas generators, want to make them code. Why? That's one of those things where you go, why?
It's controlled demolition type stuff. I mean,
right, but it gets to the, why would you destroy one of the studs in the wall that represents the United States of America? Why would you do that? And I don't like it's all money. I don't like that explanation. It's too trivial.
I tend to agree with something you said earlier, which is we've been under a color revolution for some time, some slow, methodical deconstruction at the university level, at the monetary policy level, at the civil liberties level for decades.
One could argue that to go globalist, which, I mean, they openly state they want to go globalist, so I don't see how you argue with that one, that you really have to knock the U.S. off, right? You really got to take us down. And you're not going to pull battleships up to the shore, right? That's not going to work. So you got to get us to destroy ourselves. We're doing a fine job at that. But you can buy off the rich. You can step on the poor. It's the U.S. middle class that's this unique problem. It's the flyover states. It's the guys who went to January 6th. It's people, and so you have to destroy that, and then you start looking, well, what's Soros doing? What did the lockdowns do? The lockdowns took out so many mom and pop businesses. Anyone with a half a brain could see the destruction you were doing to the core of our system. Destroying children, destroying them by locking them out of school and shit. And going after the churches, right? I'm not religious. I used to say I was atheist. I used to think religion was a problem. And I've done a complete flip. I find myself, the guys who talk about God, I go, okay, I'm not into the God thing, but I agree with you on most of the shit you say. And I've written in defense of religion because I think the U.S. is based on this Judeo-Christian ethic. The principles that made us great are really founded on the church. And you don't have to want to go to church to recognize that you tear that down, you will tear down an important structural element. And so I've flipped on that.
And that's, I mean, like you said, the U.S. is the last bastion for this, and that's why it's imperative. Like, this next decade's vital for the future of humanity, whether or not we get that free.
This is where the fourth turning comes in, right? This is real. And then the question is the U.S. cyclical, or is this an ending thing, right? Does what come out the other side, is it sufficiently unrecognizable that will we, I went through the 70s, and I guarantee you in the 70s, you did not see the 80s coming. You absolutely did not see the 80s coming. So in the 70s, everything sucks. Japan's kicking our asses. We got double-digit inflation. We got all sorts of problems. The 80s sort of came out of nowhere. And all of a sudden, we're rocking. We're controlling major industries again. And you just didn't see it coming. The question is that going to happen again after we fuck ourselves up a lot? Or not, I don't know. But we do have... I don't think we have a good military the way we thought we did. I think that's
we just ran out of ammunition to send Ukraine. That's not a good sign.
And our military is really designed to blow up banana republics, not peers. But we do have great resources, a lot of land, despite the fact Bill Gates is buying it all for reasons that are unknown. Right? Why is Bill buying up all the farmland? Is that an investment?
It's where he's going to raise all the bugs that he's going to feed us, the fake meat.
I'm not eating fucking bugs. There's no way I'm eating fucking bugs.
I've heard it's a play for CO2 pipelines that are going to have to run through all that land. So he's just going to...
CO2 pipelines, those are real fucking smart. Jesus Christ, how stupid do you have to be to believe that? And the real stupid one, uber stupid one, are the geoengineering guys who want to spray shit in the atmosphere and put a big fucking black cloud around the earth so it doesn't get fucking hot. And I'm going, do you have any idea what you're fucking with?
Dave, it's a humiliation ritual. In one side of their mouth, they're saying we need to transition the grids to solar, and then not months later, out the other side, they're saying, "Oh, by the way, we're going to blot out the sun in a few years." It's like, what?
Yeah, that is a funny. I actually hadn't put that two and two together quite as clearly as you just did. And meanwhile, by putting in a very undependable electric system, we're going to get rid of all the generators that could be used to bridge gaps when they appear.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it seems like a calculated, methodical, controlled demolition.
Which is more imaginable than that level of stupidity. So Hanlon's razor said, don't, chalk off to nefarious behavior what you can chalk off to stupidity. And I'm going, yeah, Hanlon was probably a fucking CIA guy.
I mean, it's become obvious to me at this point.
It seems that way to me, but I still go to the store and see people wearing masks. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Is it not obvious that this fucking thing is either A, never really was a big deal? By the way, I was reading articles the other day that the flu vaccines, I always said, well, it's got to be something real because, you lost sense of taste. That's kind of weird. And I just read an article that said, no, you can lose sense of taste with the flu. I go, I didn't know that. I hate the money argument. It's not just the money.
No, it's the control.
It's control. What is it, just 6 psychofucks?
I think so. That's what I've come to believe.
I guess, why would Mao kill 40 million Chinese, right?
Yeah. It's
was it Mao? Yeah.
Yeah,
why would
you just
kill 80 million Russians or whatever the number was?
Yeah, and the scale that it's at, the federal government and their military industrial complex, like it's massive. Like they can get a lot of control with all the power that they have, and you just fall back on the heuristic that nobody who's a sensible human that just wants to raise a family, do their job, hang out.
So the other thing, by the way, we're being floated on a bed of air in the equity markets by 10 companies. 10 companies, which I would say some of which are total garbage, right? Like Facebook. Facebook could go away today. Who the fuck cares? You go, well, Facebook's making a lot of money. I go, I didn't say that. I said they're garbage. Tesla doesn't really know how to make cars, right? By the time they know how to make cars, all their patent coverage will be gone, right? Everyone will figure out how to make fucking batteries the way Tesla makes batteries. And NVIDIA is trading at 45 times revenue. 45 times revenue. Sun Microsystem was trading at 10 times revenue when they did their, 98% swan dive. Mm-hmm. And then there's the ones that are profitable, though. You say Facebook, well, it's profitable. Google is profitable. But then you listen to someone like Catherine Austin Fitts, and she says they stole $20 trillion from the Pentagon. And so, if that money's flowing into Facebook and Google, they're going to have pretty good cash flow. It is not capitalism. It's not wealth creation. It's just pilfering money.
Yeah. And it seems like they're trying to do it as quickly as possible because I do believe that system is collapsing under its own weight in real time, slowly but surely. You're seeing it like crazy, like that. We mentioned it earlier, but like that call for censorship last week by the Democrats during that hearing was astonishing. And
see, the problem is Rudy kind of takes a right left equal bias, and I don't get there. Hi, Rudy, I know you're listening. Revolutions come from the left and the right, and I think this one's coming from the left. I think that this is. I don't see the right wing acting abnormal. I don't see. I hear rumors of white supremacy. If you paid me $100 for every white supremacist, I would not get rich looking for them. I don't know where they're hanging out. I mean, I could go find Hell's Angels or something.
I agree, but the Republicans, the conservative side, they're just wholly ineffective.
Well, are they ineffective by design?
Maybe.
They sure look like they're trying to win.
No. That's, again, just join us with Bitcoin. Have that switch go off. Let me know what I can do to help you flip the switch, because that's what we need to do.
At some point I'll do it.
Just take away their ability to print money and throw it all this bullshit and have sanity return to the world.
Yeah. I've told you before, I looked at Bitcoin at $10. And it shouldn't matter, right? It's a good idea if it's a good idea, right? But passing at 10 and buying at 30,000, there's issues there. That's not what stops me, though. I mean, I bought Exxon 2 years ago, and as far as I know, Exxon's appreciated a lot over the last 100 years.
So that's, let me do some calculation here. That would be 3,000x. So to do the same thing here.
That's Masco Faucets. Did you know that? Masco Faucets was the highest returning stock in its era.
Yeah, it might not.
The one-arm faucet.
If we were to repeat that, that would be like a 90 million per coin Bitcoin, which you may laugh. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility.
I have no idea. That's the problem. I mean, I see when I buy Rio Tinto shares, I can kind of look at how much they're mining out of the ground and kind of look at where their mines are. And I can kind of wrap my brain around it and say, look, I'm pretty sure it's not going to go up 30-fold. And I'm pretty sure. Michael Burry said, look, your default setting for any investment should be that if it goes down, you just hold on to it. That puts a serious constraint on a lot of investments. What it does is it says, buy something that's a revenue stream. If you bought I tell people this. So the 10 super stocks have been bugging me. There's 10 stocks that are floating the entire S&P. And the articles are all, you should have bought these 10 stocks. I go, thank you very fucking much. But I didn't know they were going to be the 10 and no one did. And you're just blowing hot air if you think they all did. And by the way, no one can tell me what the next 10 are going to be. And Buffett made a great case for why you won't know what the next 10 are going to be. And so that then says, well, then you better buy all 500 to hope to get the 10. But that just is a case for indexing. And I think the indexing story is going to go away. I think even Michael Green is starting to twitch a little bit. And
his fund doesn't return shit.
What's that?
His fund doesn't return anything.
Well, that may be, but I'm a Hussman fan too, and he's gotten clobbered. So outcome is not my metric. But what it means is there's 490 companies that are paying investors nothing. And then the question is, if you bought 10 gas stations and you paid some number of times revenue, at the end of the year, if you don't have money in the bank, you really fucked up. They put out a revenue, and if they don't put out a revenue, if every year you're just back to where you started, that's a dumb investment. That means you should sell those suckers. So we got 490 huge companies for which somehow the trickle down never seems to get to the investors. And that sounds like the Cantillon effect to me.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned...
there's millions of indexing, and they go, but we don't care if millions of people don't get paid.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned Einhorn earlier. I actually listened to a podcast with him a few days ago that I recorded recently with Patrick O'Shaughnessy. And that was the case. With Patrick O'Shaughnessy, yeah, Invest Like the Best. And he was saying that value investing is dead. Like his...
See, I think there's some tongue in cheek there. When Einhorn said, you can buy companies with a PE of 5 returning 20% on investment, and they're just, no one cares. And as I said to him sitting at a dinner one night, I said, you just hold it. It's a 20% royalty trust, for Christ's sakes. And he knows that. So when he says they're not good, what he's saying is they're just not in favor right now. But if you show me a company that you can return 20% cash flow on your investment, I will buy that all day long.
Yeah.
And he knows that too. Now, he also, and I'm going to I don't like quoting him because he told me, not you, but he also said I'm less bearish than I was X months ago when we were last together. I go, really? And he said, yeah. And then he said, he said, well, yeah, I think the whole thing's going to collapse in the fall, but I'm less bearish now. And I'm going, David, if I know shit's happening in the fall, I'm out. I'm gone. Right? You tell me what's going to happen in 5 years, I'll go be either out or in. I don't need to know. That's the Michael Berry model, right? That's the Peter Lynch model. Buy shit that's going to over time go up.
Yeah. I think Bitcoin falls into that bucket of shit, if you will.
Yeah, no, it could. It could. It's just so complicated to me. And I know you think it's simple. No. It's emotionally complicated.
We're making progress. It's been 3 or 4 years that we've been doing this now. This is the most bullish I've ever heard you. So,
right. I'm fairly bullish. I just think there'll be a time when I know to do it, and it's not going to be the price. It's not about the price.
What do you think it's going to be?
It's got to be some point where I'm going to go, the Bitcoin guys have control now. Right now, you got a team on the field. But this is like, it's Bayesian statistics for me. So it's the first quarter. And you guys have thrown some nice passes.
Okay. All right. I'll keep that in mind.
Where I say, okay, I'm packing up my goddamn cushion. I'm going home because they fucking won, right? Yeah. Or, it's 50-0 at this point, And so there's going to be a moment where Bitcoin, where it looks like they're going to win.
I think we're getting close to that moment, believe it or not.
Keep me posted. I know you think you're going to win it, period. But I think the most respected hodlers, the ones who get the most respect out of me, are the ones who acknowledge the ambiguity, right? If I'm talking to somebody and he says, you can't lose, I go, oh, fuck. You don't understand the structure of markets. You don't understand politics enough. There's way too many ways this could go bad. And it might be the best bet in town. I'll give you that.
Yeah. But my bear case is that the CBDC gets introduced and it just delays the inevitable win.
Maybe, but as Rudy said, if they say, look, we'll put you in jail for the rest of your fucking life if you use Bitcoin. The last couple of years have convinced me that they ain't joking if they do that. That there's nothing that says they have to behave within the law, normal law.
They already make it abundantly clear that there's a two-tier justice system here. So
we all become Julian Assange at some point if we're not careful.
Yeah. And that's the question: is like how many Assanges do other people see before they stand up and say, "Hey, wait a second, this is really fucked up."
People did Mao kill, right? Stalin kill.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take many before you go, it's not worth it to me. This is not fun.
Yeah, that's where I think the most successful defense of Bitcoin will come from individual states. Part of the reason I live in Texas, I think that may be a massive tipping point once you see states like Texas, Florida, Wyoming,
right,
South Dakota, Oklahoma, Kentucky, Tennessee, basically say, hey, federal government, we're going to take care of Bitcoin.
Bernard von Nothaus. Do you remember that guy? Bernard von Nothaus?
No.
Bernard von Nothaus made a bunch of silver coins that looked like currency, $1 coins. And I think they said U.S. on them, but they're clearly not U.S. coins. He wasn't counterfeiting. They threw him in jail for years for counterfeiting. They said, no, you flew too close to the sun on that one, Bernie.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
You can't charge the rotunda either, by the way.
Yeah. It was like, yeah, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. And I guess that's
tricky. That's where it gets real tricky.
Yeah. You got to keep pushing it, knowing that the specter of getting tossed in the clinker is always on the horizon, but
yeah,
if not us, then who? It's like that's why I said with Ed Dowd when I recorded with him a couple of weeks ago, we need more people to stand up and have an I am Spartacus moment where it's literally something mental in people's minds where
You
that switch.
need to not be fearful.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing progress, right? That's where Elon, although Rudy was critical of Twitter, but the ability to stand up and say shit you couldn't say a year ago is really important.
That's where I think Elon, like if you look outside the political arena, like he's the Manchurian candidate of.
He's a deep stater. Everything he does is deep state.
I think what we're seeing now with Twitter and the transition to X.com is a happy honeymoon period that will end pretty quickly. Like he wants to make this.
Every single company he's ever done was a deep state company. So but it's also possible he reached an age in his life where he said, I got to do something. I, by the way, my support of Trump, which isn't wild support, I actually wish someone would come along I'd say that's great, is in part because I think his narcissism, which first was buffoonery, and it was just shallow narcissism, I think turned into a narcissism that was, I want to be one of the great presidents, and this is what I got to do to be a great president. And it's narcissism, but it's well sculpted.
Yeah. Weaponize a narcissism.
That's right.
Yeah.
By the way, I read a book on narcissism. They said Trump wasn't the worst. They said, actually, LBJ was worse. They said Trump was very narcissistic, but not clinically. He wouldn't fall in. I don't know how you not put him in a clinical narcissist category, but they talked about matter of factly like he's a narcissist, but they were not brutal on him. Unfortunately, the book was about how to deal with narcissists in your life. It was more about how to when your husband's a narcissist, your wife's a narcissist, something like that. How do you handle it? But I think Trump became, his calling got higher. And it's his narcissism. But I think he does want to change the country because he wants to narcissistically be one of the greats.
Yeah. I'm with you, though. I wish it was like if we get another Biden-Trump election, it's like, what the hell is going on?
That'll be painful. But I don't think there's a chance Trump wins. I think there. So another person of prominence said, I have reason to believe, and it's not just a hunch, that Michelle Obama, aka Big Mike,
he's going to run.
Wants to run, but does not want to campaign. So they could be stalling to bring her in as the white knight, excuse the phrase, but they could be stalling to bring her in at the last minute, and they got to wait long enough so that somehow Kamala doesn't become an incumbent.
Yeah, that's one of my theories too. Because Gavin Newsom's obviously detested by most of the country.
Hillary unelectability quotient, right? I mean, he can't defend anything in California.
No.
My wife says he's handsome. He looks like a slimy eel to me. I mean, he looks like a pimp.
Yeah, that's my theory. Everybody's like, oh, they're just going to put Gavin Newsom in. I'm like, no, they're bringing Michelle Obama back.
So disgusting.
They had her on, I believe it was like it might have been Oprah or The View.
Oh, by the way, all this deep, dark shit, this deep, dark fucking stuff, Oprah shows up a lot.
Oh, yeah, she's in the middle of it. What was that dude out of Brazil? She was like best friends with.
Yeah, the guy that shows up in the middle of it, the Jeff Koons balloon boy.
Yeah.
That's weird stuff, too.
Yeah. They always have schools in emerging countries as well, emerging markets.
But he hangs out with all the wrong people.
Yeah.
He's on the wrong boards of directors. And it just... Then there's a woman named Liz Crocken who's supposedly been battling this. Mm-hmm. But you can find Liz's associations are a little sketchy. Now, someone told me the other day, they said, I think she is the real deal. I go, yeah, but she has some guilt by association.
From what her...
She's on board with directors of some of these international missing children foundations and stuff.
Interesting.
And I would think she'd be kind of toxic in that world.
Yeah. Interesting. Limited hangouts everywhere.
Where'd that phrase come from? Limited hangout. What's that?
The CIA, I believe.
What does it mean? What's the literal definition?
you basically give people like a part of the story to make it feel like you're being revealed something that you knew to be nefarious. But it's not the whole part of the city. It's a limited hangout.
Are they being duped, or do they knowingly do it?
The CIA knowingly does it as like a pressure. It's like a pressure release valve. Like, all right, they're on to us. Like, let's give them a little bit of information to make it seem like.
Right, but does the person who's appears to be the good guy, do they actually think they're good guys and don't realize they're being played, or is Tucker Carlson legit? I mean, he plays a great game.
Yeah, I don't know.
But I wouldn't believe anyone. I wouldn't trust anyone until I had a reason to trust him. And Tucker gets me as close as I can get. But he has 41,000 hours of tapes, or had them, and he didn't release them.
Yeah. He
tried to get into the CIA when he was young, which that's okay. I can live with that. It'll be cool. But Tucker comes from powerful sources.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, was one of the largest personalities in mainstream media. Yeah, it's hard. And then you go back, like what you were talking about earlier with the CIA, with Mockingbird and Paperclip. Like, that they've been using these mediums for decades.
What percentage of the FBI do you think actually works on good stuff?
I don't know. That's another trope. It's like, it's the higher ups are the bad, like the agents and middle management. And
guys in the bracket were stepping on it like crazy from the low levels, and they all ended up getting good deals afterwards. It's really interesting. At the end of the book, he says, this guy became this guy became this guy became this. Like in the Vegas shooting, one of the crisis actors, Mike Kroc, who's just some hick from Alaska, he became the Alaska state senator. Lombardo was the sheriff who said it was multiple shooters, and the next day said it was only one shooter. He became, I think, the congressman or the governor of Nevada. These guys get rewarded with positions of power.
Yeah,
it's fucked up, but I don't know how. There's a lot of problems with the Uvalde shooting.
Yep,
and it makes no sense.
I know, just from nature of living in Texas now. I know people who have family down there, and apparently on the ground, a lot of the families are like, "This does not make any sense."
Well, I mean, you have 370 cops, and not one of them ran in for 77 minutes, right?
Yeah.
You can pick 5 guys out of the phone book, and 3 of them would have run in.
Yeah.
Right? That's just what you're called to do. That's when you know it's time. You got a gun, you go. And you certainly run to the shooter, get closer, right? You certainly try to get within shooting distance of the guy. They didn't.
Yeah, they were like in the halls checking text and stuff like that. It was very
they had 2 famous people, two heroes, the mother who ran in and the border guard, off-duty border guard who ran in. We don't know who they are. They're not famous. They've done no interviews on Donahue-like shows. Why not?
Yeah.
Be heroes, wouldn't they? Now, when I watched her get interviewed, she sounded like Stephen Paddock's brother getting interviewed. A lot of babbling, no content. Contradictions.
Mm-hmm.
She told what happened, and she contradicted herself repeatedly. I'm going, I don't think she ran in. I don't think that's part of the story.
Yeah. And then you hear like on the ground reports that there were like military planes like circling the area all day. And say, what the hell was going on there?
Yeah. I don't even know if all the kids got killed. I don't know. I don't know if that's where, and then, Sandy Hook.
Yeah, you're about to get us in AJ territory right now. I'm going to get $1 billion defamation suit.
Yeah, I know. Made a mistake there. But it's not a simple story. How's that? It's not a simple story.
No.
Robbie Parker. Right? Robbie Parker.
Yeah, it's all weird.
I'll let you go. You can delete that last part if you want.
You're going to leave me good? No, we're going to keep it in. It's always a pleasure, Dave. I'm glad we got Rudy on.
That was good. That was a coup.
Got Rudy on, then we talked about Pizzagate for an hour.
Send me a link. We'll try to get some momentum going.
All right.
What- I can't remember.
We'll post this tomorrow.
Okay. No problem. Adios.
See you, Dave.
Peace. Peace.
Peace and love, freaks.